Hello and welcome to the Hawks Nest live stream show. My name is Brett again. I appreciate you watching and tuning on in from wherever you're tuning in worldwide. We got ourselves a little bit of breaking news. The Seattle Seahawks a couple of hours ago here today released inside starting linebacker Tyrel Dodson, a free agent pickup from the Buffalo Bills last year, and a very surprising move at this time of the season for a guy that started all these games. A guy that the Hawks had, I think, in McDonald shown in recent weeks that they weren't necessarily liking where his play was at, considering that a big part of making the Ernest Jones move was, yes, also moving off of Jerome Baker. But then also there was the intent to move Dodson into the will linebacker role and see if he could take to that. And instead of that, it doesn't sound like he took to it too well by McDonald's outlook of the past two games with him in that role. And so the Seahawks are going to now roll with Tyree Knight, the rookie fourth rounder out of UTEP, who has looked pretty good and solid in his action. But a little bit of probably a rattling a bit of the locker room potentially as well, as to say, hey, you got to play hard here. You got to play up to the standard where we want you at. And I think when I look to unpack this move a little bit, it does come a little bit, I think, from a place of wanting a certain style of player in here on his defense, that being McDonald, and that some of the guys that they have brought in, while very maybe talented, don't necessarily totally ascribe to where he wants to get as far as that kind of level of play. And so let's look at a few things right now that show a little bit of maybe why the move is made, and kind of diving a little bit more into the depths of it here is you have Dodson, 35th highest rated inside linebacker in the sport by PFF. And we're not just going off PFF, of course. Got a couple clips I want to show you. As I always say, we got to marry the PFF to the film and try to get the full kind of a little bit of a view for it. I'm not going to go a lot of clips because there's not a lot of good clips from him this year, quite frankly, on that. And he was not a guy that was necessarily horribly graded. The 52 grade, as you'll see in a second here, comes more from the run defense. But pretty good coverage. That's the final right-hand grade. You can see the guys around him. You have Anzoli, Nakobe Dean, Levante David just below him, and just above him, you've got our own former Cody Barton. I mean, maybe right there, he's saying, well, he's a little worse rated than Cody Barton. Well, maybe a bit of an indicator there on that one. Now, also, funny enough, Ernest Jones is right there for his season, including his time with Tennessee, right there neck and neck with Ernest. But Ernest, this is where we come back to not just what a player is graded at, but also the type of player you want to bring into the building and what you need across the board from a defense if you want to run a certain style of defense like McDonald wants to run. And so wasn't really highly well graded necessarily. You're not even in the top 32 inside linebackers graded in the sport. Just off that basis alone, you go, okay, that makes it a little bit of an understandable point. As I said, the run defense is the one that stands out here when you look at his overall coverage stuff. He's 65 grade. 65 is about average. So, a very tiny itty bitty smidgen above maybe league average play, kind of. And again, I know he's past 32 inside linebackers starting in the league, but of course there's 64 in total because you're going to have 2 inside linebackers for every team starting, to put that a little bit in perspective. So middle of the road by grade, decent in coverage, though I would offer to you that I don't know if I really remember him outside maybe the Denver game even coming close to making a play on the ball or knocking away from a guy when he was out there in defense. He had one play that was against Cooper Kupp in double coverage this past week. I just showed in last week's show where he's undercutting the route, playing double team with Tariq Woolen, and still if Stafford's able to get the throw off, if William doesn't hit Stafford's arm, he might be able to still kind of fit it in there. So I don't think that there was a lot you were getting from him when we came to the film on this, but we can see that the grades in themselves are telling a kind of a story of here right on the surface of this. You can also see by the grades on a weekly basis, which is what this breakdown is. I'll try to bring it big here so you guys can see it in focus. But these are the seasonal grades as you go through. You have Denver, you have New York Giants, 2 games where he's graded high. Otherwise, you've got some dips in there. And what is key to note on this as well is the fact that you have the last 2 weeks, week 8 and 9, where he hasn't been particularly well graded, where the team was thinking, okay, we're going to move him back to the will linebacker position, back to the position that he played last year for the Bills, where he was a PFF darling for them. They're one of the highest rated linebackers in the sport last year, playing from will, not from Mike. So the team, staff thought with Jones, we move him back to that spot where he's effective last year, let him roll. Yet he doesn't seem to be taking to it too well. I also think there's a bit of that part of this where you go, you're also in a bit of a prove it deal here. And I think Tyrel Dodson was a really classy, upstanding kind of pro guy coming in. Like he was that, it seemed like he had the right mentality and, definitely was saying the right things. So I don't question anything with that as far as his will or want or can do on that. But I do think that there are moments on tape that are going to stand out when the staff looked at this, especially during the bye week and, self-scouted and went back and took a look at things and said, okay, where is he at? And is he playing violent? Is he playing with physicality? Is he getting off blocks? Is he doing the things that we need our linebackers to do in this defense? And this play, and I didn't want to go through and show a 15, 20 play litany of this stuff, but this is the type of play that really just kind of indicates a bit of what I'm talking about. He's nowhere near getting off his block. He gets completely neutralized on this play. Doesn't seem like he's really got a lot of fighter spirit to get off of it. He seems pretty happy to be blocked and to kind of stay blocked. And there's a lot of that on this tape. There was a lot on the tape with him and both Baker doing the same thing. Where you've got, look at Baker here, by the way. So let's slow it down and watch both of your inside linebackers on this particular play. Baker's essentially, by the way, playing will here. So he does a good job of getting past 60, but then just kind of walks his way over to the play on the other side. And then Dodson, again, just knows where the play is going, diagnoses it, but then just doesn't really get off the block. He just kind of gets held up in there. Now, I know he's not the biggest guy. And this is part of why you wanted to move him to the will, where he maybe has less of that type of stuff where it's coming downhill second level at him. But same game. Here's where we come down to what I would question a little bit at times of, are you playing 100 miles an hour or are you playing at about 50? Are you Sammy Hagar in this? I can't drive 55. Is that what we're doing here? Dodson, he's playing will here. Baker's the mic. Look at how far out Dodson is on this play. Everybody else rallying to the ball, flying to the ball. What is he protecting on the backside here? Hall's the backside player. Hall's got it all wrapped up on the backside. So he can't come back to me as a coach and say, Coach, I'm protecting the backside here on this play. You're not even trying to get it on a run fit here. You're 10 yards away from where the play is made as an inside linebacker on a run play. And, this was blown up in the backfield and all that stuff. I get that part of it, but maybe he just throttles it down after he sees that. But there's a lot of throttling it down on the tape. Too much throttling it down. And then this is the keynote moment, really one of the keynote moments of the season to me with Baker and Dodson. You want your just snapshot Polaroid. Why is it both these guys aren't with the team now? I watch this as a coach, and I'm watching my two inside linebackers on this play, and I go, that just is not going to be enough. That's never going to be enough. And Rashawn Jenkins completely is butt cheeks on his approach to the ball carrier, and he's the one that allows this thing to go for crazy amount of yardage. But your linebackers here, there's almost a minimal amount of effort. This is for game. This isn't a middle point play of the game. This is for game. You're trying to get the ball back to your offense on a day where you've gotten very few stops. And it's almost like he magnets to the block of the guard. It's like it's almost like the guard's got pulling him with the magnets to him. And Baker at the very same time on the other side of the play. When you get these gouging kind of plays in the run game like we've seen this year that aren't just going for the 4 or 5 yards, but are 8, 10, 12 yards. These type of things happen because both of your two inside linebackers at times are both getting equally neutralized up. We saw this a couple of years ago with Brooks and Barton starting, where both of them, because your defensive line was able to get one-on-one up all the time, it was constant second level blocks, and they would get eaten up on that stuff. And then you're talking about a successful run that might go for 6 or 7 yards that becomes that 15, 20 yarder. Or in the case of Garendo at the end of the game against the Niners, an 80-yard run for game. And this is why these guys are out. It's not surprising the tape matches up to what you see from the PFF scores. I think in many ways you could say that the PFF scores were being probably kind to Dodson more than was deservedly so. Even in coverage, you get kind of plays like this. I was going back and watching through again against the Patriots, where it's not a blown coverage. This is the what I would call Jordan Brooks zone coverage drop to nowhere is what I would probably term this. You're dropping to a spot, but you're not really picking up anybody, including the guy Hunter Henry, who pretty much had a career day on this day. The only guy really who could threaten that Seahawks defense on the day, and Brissett just worked him like a drummer with just one drum. But again, the 73 grade doesn't really match to what you see from him on tape, which is a guy that's, just kind of getting by out there on both sides of what you're asking him to do, either as a run defender and as in pass coverage. And as we've seen in Tyrese Knight, there's potentially some really legitimate upside here to him as a player. I've really warmed up on him, and the more I've been able to watch him, is he looks like a guy with a pretty universal skill set. He's not himself been poorly graded. And so it does make some sense. There is a little bit of an element to this that's worth noting, which is going to be the salary situation and how that plays out to a tiny, tiny little bit. This is not a major part of this puzzle, but you want to think about all factors, I suppose, on this. He has a $760,000 per game bonus on the season. Now, half of that is approximately half that's been earned up until this point. So now half of it goes back into the pocket of the Seahawks. If he is signed to another team, if the Bills come back and pick him up, and I'd estimate somebody will probably pick him up, they then would be on the hook for the remaining portion of his base salary. So you save approximately right in the neighborhood of about a $1.4 million in savings on this deal if he does get picked up immediately, by how that'll offsuit a little bit. If you're looking for if Tyrese Knight is ready to go or not, by the way, I thought this was pretty funny looking at this just before the stream. This is this is him signaling the 12th man. I'm sure many of them right now hitting him up going, I hope you're ready, Rook. I hope you're good to go, Rook. I hope you got the pads and the helmet all right, and let's go. You're starting this one. It's on you now. And so he's giving a little bit of a wink to the 12th man. I kind of like that. Tyrese, like I said, not badly graded throughout this year so far. He's been pretty good for you in the 4 games. Obviously, that's just 7 snaps there against Atlanta, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. That's what we call sample size. But the other games where he got significant snaps, he seemed to get at least better by that Detroit game overall. But 53 is obviously a little bit lower than Dodson's at, where he's more 65-ish, and you may be going a little bit of a step back this year at the position to take the 2 steps forward next year, where that's the part of this that we have to address and certainly recognize as a possibility here, which is just that the staff may be making their bones with this and saying, hey, this is a move that is not for the here and now. It is one that we're going to develop this kid. We're going to get him the snaps. We're going to get this defense better prepared moving on into next year. I don't think that means they're going to tank mode or they're not trying to still compete. They just like where the upside of I think Tyrese Knight's going. And I don't think that they saw with Dodson that being a guy that they were getting a lot of instant returns for a guy on a prove-it deal, nor a guy that was going to be part of the long-term plan here in Seattle. So a surprising move in the timing and the player to do this. In a little bit of the kind of signaling a little bit again to that side of saying there's a little bit of this sliding into that scale of we're going to be pivoting this a bit to the long term of this team and what we look to want to get done here with the vision of this team. And that's what I've been speaking to a little bit on this process, where we want to dance around the words of rebuild. And I think that things get too much categorized into it's got to be this thing or it's all this thing. And there is parts of this that you're going to have to really kind of, in certain ways, rebuild and get to the right place of things. And hopefully Tyrese Knight can help cement one of those positional groups now for this upcoming year, to make them go into this offseason going, okay, that's checked off, one less thing done. We can certainly get more depth there, but we don't have to be out there pounding the pavement for that starting will linebacker, especially if Ernest Jones goes, and you're also having to go get a middle linebacker at the same point in time. And so, again, understand the move. I'd love to hear where you guys stand on it today. We will have a quick little stream on this. The Seahawks made a couple of other moves that were interesting. You've got Job getting put on the active roster, which I think I'd love to see. I see from some of these guys at times, these not undrafted guys, but these back end kind of roster guys we've seen play this year. And what's been notable to me about how they've played, and I think that's got to be standing out to McDonald too, is that evident spirit that's there in some of these guys and the level of real want. And I'm out here to not only be an NFL football player. I'm not just happy being an NFL player. I want to stay on this. I want to be an NFL. And you can feel the hunger and the fight in them. You can feel that in Job to me. You can feel that in White last week as a wide receiver and the effort he was giving you, not only as a wide receiver, but also course, in the special teams game as a punt blocker. And that's kind of more of, I think, the spirit that needs to be endowed on the rest of this team as we go forward. And the outlook of it, I think, more as we go forward, is to make sure that we're uniformly getting that buy-in, and maybe even above talent, I would say at times on this one, where you really need the cemented 11 guys connected, especially defensively, I think, to make this defense work. And if you have guys that aren't playing with that real tenacious spirit, then you just can't quite get this defense fully rolling in the way you want it to be done. So more of that there. You've got to one last little thought on this too, is you have Josh Ross, a guy they signed, who was a former Michigan player under McDonald, went to the Ravens. A lot of familiarity with this defense. I think there was also a partial bit of this too, if Tyrese Knight can't do it, you do have Josh Ross there as well, of a guy that they probably feel good about. He'll know the defense, he'll know his job, he'll be one of those kind of buy-in players, hard hat kind of players in his mentality. And so McDonald probably just had some confidence that he'll be able to more than keep this up to snuff as we go forward throughout the course of this year, even moving on from Dodson at kind of that average sort of state of where he was. But I think they really wanted to see a little more impact from him from the will linebacker role, and they just didn't quite get it on that one. All right, let's pop in with you guys here. Again, we're going to do a quick show today. So this is just quick in and outer because we had kind of some of this breaking news today with you guys. Promise has been a member for the Hawks Nest for 12 long months. Thank you for the year-long dedication to the channel. Promise, I was not expecting the release of Todd, but hey, bye-bye. Yeah, I wasn't expecting this either. I will say there is very rare consensus opinion out there in the Hawk fandom at times on players. Even our star players will have sometimes our differences of opinion. But it was very shocking to me that there was so much consensus out there when it came to both Dodson and Baker when we got about 5-6 games into this year. These guys are not it. And the effort level is not it. And this wasn't just purely my opinion, but something I've heard from my chat and from other places. And you go, whoa, well, when it is much that everyone's seeing the same thing, then we must be probably seeing the same thing. If it smells like it, if it looks like it, if you step in it and it's on your shoe, it's probably is, right? It is what it is on that. And you just gotta go and look for the other parts. And interesting too with some of these guys being on the 1-year deals, where atypically, and I think this is why John's leaned in this at times, is that normally in NFL history, if you get guys on 1-year deals, that you get a little bit more of that. I know what's on the line. I know what the season's about. I know what I've got to get done to make sure that I'm getting paid and securing the money, but not exactly necessarily. Let's say that. Promise, it was a shocker, man. But Tyrese has looked good, and he's going over that will linebacker role. Should be a good fit for him, and a guy that possesses a good skill set, good size, good ability to take on those blocks and be physical. He's a little bit, I think, a bigger player than Dodson. You could really feel with Tyrese Knight at training camp when I was there in person, when they went through and they were hitting those tackling dummies, and they have the linebackers just doing strike drills, essentially, strike, throw, and he's hitting that thing, and he's making that thing ring from 2 fields over all the way up the berm versus the other guys that were hitting that pad. There's certainly a little bit of an extra oomph in Tyrese Knight's game there on that part. We'll see, though. Seth Kealoha, thank you for the $5 donation, Seth. Be prepared for some big roster changes this next offseason with a full year under this coaching staff. Can't wait for more Tyrese Knight. He's a dog. He definitely was playing like a dog so far for us, and when he was out there, and that he definitely a rookie and learning the ropes on that. But you ask the rookie, if you're going to make a mistake, make it going 100 miles an hour. Make it being physical and violent. And that is exactly what Tyrese was giving you. And so if he can bring more of that to the defense, yes, sir, yes, please. We see this with Ernest Jones, right? Ernest Jones was brought here with a man, he was like Liam Neeson, brought here with a particular skill set to do a particular thing. And that's that stopping power. That's that tackling ability. If my guy's getting in a position to make the tackle, I don't want this crap watching you slide off like the guy was oiled up. You bring him to the ground, and you do so immediately. Don't wait for everybody else to arrive to help you out. You get the job done. I'll work on getting the cavalry your way, but don't be relying on it like some training wheels for your ability to tackle. And understandable, and I agree with you. It would not. The part that's surprising is this release, but this is also a bit of an indicator here in the darkness about what they might be looking to do as we go forward. And with the the Baker move is that I wouldn't be surprised to see that turnover you talk about, and certainly in a variety of different areas, because some of what I saw earlier this year, if I'm McDonald, there's things that you can put up with. You can put up with, hey, I'm learning this scheme, and I zigged when I should have zagged. You can't put up with, I'm questioning your effort on tape. And it can't be showing up so sometimes vibrantly as even casual fans like myself can watch it and see it and pick it out. Nonetheless, say nothing for just, like I said, that consensus of people that we're seeing it. And I think as he gets into this offseason, he's going to be looking at tape, and John's going to be very willing at that point to say, hey, we did it once. Well, I'm happy to do it again. Part of the process. It'd be great if they could have all clicked in right from the jump and it all works in the jump, but if they don't, you don't do this on cost. You don't hold on. You look and pivot to what will work, what will get this thing going. But thank you, Seth. I appreciate that donation, and very kind of you. Hand grenade, which one was Baker? Sorry, I was kind of showing. So Baker's your inside linebacker 17 on this one, where you got the kind of the laissez-faire attitude from Dodson on the backside here. Baker's your middle here. Dodson's your will. I believe that's how they're playing it here. And then the first one was, this was the tough one, where Baker's, I think he's playing the will here, and Dodson's the mic. But just gets pushed out. Haley says, alleged that they told Dodson he was going to be benched and he wasn't happy about it. Makes sense since he's on a prove-it deal. Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Haley. I forgot to address that part of it. Yes, we're hearing the rumor on this one. The scuttlebutt is that the reason that Dodson got released on this is that he was told that he was going to be benched in favor of Tyrese Knight. And to Haley's point, there's an understandable part to that with Dodson on this, where I haven't played bad. You're having me move positions now after having me in training camp in this other position. And I've been at least league average. You're not paying me some monster deal here to expect me to be, you're not a 4-year, $55 million inside linebacker deal here. I'm trying to go get that deal, but you're not paying for that. You don't have a right to bench me. This is more about for you a move, like I'm talking about a bit at the top. This is more a move for you to do this down the stream. You're looking to try to develop this kid for next year and the year after. It isn't as much for even right now, where you can look me in the face and say, he's better than you right now. He's going to better help us win games for sure right now than you can at the well. They might just feel that way, but I would also think there's a little bit of him having a sneaking suspicion that, yeah, but there's probably also the whole thing there too, where but you're also doing the developmental thing here. So he's trying to make that money. And from his standpoint, he gets released and probably snatched right back up by the Buffalo Bills. And he's probably starting for the Buffalo Bills this next Sunday or the Sunday after that. So, and better chance to shine from his perspective. I'd get that. I would. Dune Moose says, well, glad leadership didn't stick with wasting the entire season on him. Me too, man. If it ain't working, it ain't working. Let it roll. El Nino, it's starting to happen. McDonald is starting to creep in his rookie class. I love it. Indeed he is. This was Mike's guy too. Let's remember, this was the guy that we all kind of thought or was hearing that maybe John said, hey, yeah, this is your pick, Mike. You roll with it. Grab, who do you want here? Which of these linebackers you like? Jeremy R. says, whoa, I didn't realize the lack of effort with Dodson on some plays. It was an epidemic, and I don't want to overstate it too much on it, Jeremy. I want to definitely put a little bit of a lens to it, because I think it's very important, especially in the bigger picture of things when it comes to this defense and the type of players that we've got to look to target. But it was there. Too many of those things where it's, you can get yourself on a block in football, and you can make yourself look very blocked. And if you kind of look at a lot of these plays happening time and time again, you can sort of catch at times where it's the guy's making a good show of it. It's like the inverse flop, where a lot of activity, a lot of you doing this through, but you're not really getting off of anything, You're just kind of, it's a lot of movement and motion, and you see that happen in time and you go, and there was times last year I saw him just getting he would get to the spot quicker, maybe a little less instinctual. Because if you're going to be that guy that can't get off of the blocks at the second level as an inside linebacker, then you have to be the guy that can get to the spot quicker than the blocker can get there. But that's not how you. It's just not what you're going to get from him. Not what we've got from him this year, at least. Thank you, Young Bido Game. Please do, if you guys can, for me, hit that like button. Maybe sub on up too. I appreciate it. Zorn says, with any luck, they'll have 5 guys or so to keep next year. Rebuild required. It very well may. I think that John and Mike have to be honest with themselves in this process. This is the hardest part more for John than it will be for Mike. Mike's not married to these guys. Mike inherited these guys. John's got to be open to the fact that, and I think the best way for him to look at this, and the way I've been trying to sell this, is less about these guys aren't talented as much as that they're not fits for my defense to make this defense go the way that my head coach wants it to go. And some of these guys are going to have some asset value to them if you do need to flip them, but you've got to get the right guys in. Trevor McGuire says, let's not forget about the kid that we jacked off the Raiders practice squad last year. Tyrese, that was Drake Thomas you're talking about. And yeah, he's flashed a little bit. They were doing a little bit of, it seems like they've sort of pivoted away from this. They started out the year doing a lot of it, but they might do more here with Night out there, where Drake's a real good cover linebacker. So you have Tyrese out there in knowing rundown situations, and then you trot out Drake for more pass packages, and then you specialize the position a little bit. Certainly might be something that they look to do this year. Trevor says, I heard they might put Abe on IR this week. I hope not. Definitely feel for the kid. Whew. Boy. That would be brutal. That'd be brutal. Calm Cow, HawksNest. I feel like giving players 1-year contracts just make them lesser as they make business decisions. I think that's a little bit of what I'm starting to kind of grow on to thinking with this too, Calm Cow, is that maybe in the past that it was giving what I was thinking, what John would be thinking, and giving these contracts out, and that prior with these guys, that meant that you were going to get a level of play where they're going to go, it'll be more about earning that big contract. And instead, maybe you're getting a little bit more of times of make sure I'm staying clean here. Make sure I'm not putting myself in a position to be, and I don't know it for sure, but there is some suspicions here, Calm Cow, that maybe there's a little bit of that's now a bit of this evolution of the sport, these contracts that are given out, that's what's going on here. And I don't think I think though Johns has leaned into 1-year contracts. I don't think that it was his ideal to end up here with this inside linebacker position. I just don't think that they really ended up liking what they had from Cody Barton in his development, nor what they ended up getting from where Jordan Brooks was at in his development. I think both those two guys, they just went, okay, we kind of missed on these. We got to go to something else. Dune says, I'm waiting for the D. Williams announcement. Oh, I can wish. Warlock says, I'm not expecting a Super Bowl, but I need to see a competitive team putting itself in a position to win in the future. A competitive team, a team with a lot of fire, grit, and heart, something I'd like to see right now, because that's something that's been missing from this team for a little bit of time now. And hopefully we get ourselves there in the near future, Warlock. I think that if you build it right, you build it to the identity of what your coach wants and how you want to put it, then you can get there. I think in some ways we have some mismatched parts a little bit. Again, not without lack of talent, but just maybe a little bit of a mismatch situation going on, just a bit. Ricardo says, Dodson owns stock in PFF. Why does he always get graded so well? Well, he's still, I think this year right now, if I'm not mistaken, like 20 points approximately down from where he was at by grade last year with PFF. But they have probably been pretty kind on him, considering that I can show you a lot of centerpiece plays in the run game where we can backtrack it to him really struggling to get off blocks, late to the spot, effort. 3 hours says if we started Al next year, we're taking Arch Manning. Yeah, I would probably say so. We'd be in position to. Then the joke would be on us. All the Hawk fans would get all excited, like, Manning, Manning, Manning. Then Eli and Payton coming out there. We're not going to let him play in Seattle. It's not going to happen. He's going to play on the East Coast. Jordan, thank you for the $5 donation. Appreciate you, Jordan. It's good to see you in the house too, brother. He says, Dodson plays like my user in Madden. Lost and rarely fills the gap correctly. Same for me, Jordan. And boy, it does stand out. When I did watch a lot of the tape last year with the Bills, that was something that did stand out to me, was that spirit of want, can do, will, get after it. I'm gonna take advantage of this opportunity. I've been waiting for this chance. I got it. Let's go. Not as much there. And there are those two types of linebackers. It's a very important, I think, designation to make. You know, you have linemen, you have your trash can full of dirts that are going to be people movers. You got your people movers. And with your inside linebackers, you have your Bobby Wagners, who can sometimes be almost impossible to block with the lineman coming downhill on them. They're so good about the lateral ability to sort of juke a guy, and then the great use of hands with it to pivot off those blocks if you do catch them, to the strength and power to get off the blocks. Then you've got those linebackers that are a little more pronounced in this game now, that are your 220 to 230 pounders who want to get it done with speed and getting to that spot before that lineman can get there to block them. And so the lineman's not in position to clear them out of the hole because they're already in the hole, so to speak. You got to be one of those two. And if you're caught in neitherville, it's going to be a long day for the defense to stop in the run, especially when you have two of those starting on the field at once. But yeah, that's an accurate assessment, Jordan. I saw it the same way. I like that. Dodson plays like my user in Madden. Lost and rarely fills the gap correctly. I think Jamie Sheriff is still on the practice squad, David. I think he's been activated a time or so. I can't remember, but he's still around. Nate says Dodson played how KJ Wright played his last season with us. When an offensive lineman gets their hands on Dodson, he gets completely wiped out of the play. Exactly. He's not only getting blocked, he's getting blocked and moved, and then he's not getting off the block. And yeah, Travel Fanatic makes a good point. Coach M's whole defense system relies on linebackers. I think at the very least, if we could say, I think to a degree, relies on linebackers, and relies on linebackers doing specific things really well. You know, like physicality, like filling those gaps, having the instincts to get to the right place, the right time in the run game, especially. Because we've seen that with McDonald, and even one of the good things that Seahawks defense does is they get teams into third and long. He's got the creative packages and the ways to really then press down on those teams. But you've got to give him a third and long. How do you get in third and long? Well, stopping the run well on early downs is a good way to get you there. And so it's sort of, that's where that beginning point comes versus the other stuff that comes down the line. Dizzy agrees with me. He says, I think the Bills pick Dodson up for sure. They need him. Yeah. I think it just makes too much sense there, right? Familiarity. They need the help there. They've had some linebackers. Milano's not out. John Dorse is judging by how the coach and moves are indicating we're going to go into a complete rebuild. It might happen. I'm preparing my soul for it. I think that there's arguments to be made for going a couple different directions here from Schneider's perspective, and we can all ruminate on that. But I think that there's also the bit that we have to understand about what they're sensing from the energy in the building, the buy-in in the building, the leaders that are or are not emerging in the building, and that's a big pieces to this big puzzle. And if those things are missing, then the requirement would be to pivot that way. And that's a bit of information that we all don't quite know. We can get a sense for it come game day, by the record we're seeing, by effort level, all that stuff to a degree. But you have to be in the building day by day, I think, to really understand. And McDonald's been around a couple of different programs at Michigan and Baltimore with players that are bought in. Say what you will about both of, in Michigan's case, that's a championship team there. went on to win a couple of years. In Baltimore's case, that's a perennial, really, really good team, one of the best teams in the NFL every year. And so he knows what it looks like. He knows what buy-in looks like. He knows what, hey, I've got guys that like being pros, that like being NFL players, that'll do that bare minimum. And we need more than that in here. And so it may be the requirement here. It may be, John. And I think we've got to be, I don't think we have to be. Obviously, you can be impatient if you want. I'm not here to tell you how to react to that. You can be completely pissed off at John. I think John's going to get a lot of extra heat on that one. I will say in particular here, he's kind of had a bit of a brutal off season here. By the way that his moves have played out to this season, you signed those two inside linebackers. Now they're gone. You could have moved off the Draymond Jones contract. You stayed on that. Laken Tomlinson's been all right. He's been all right because he's somewhat getting a little bit better. But the George Fant deal, that move blew up in you. You're still waiting on Lucas, which you had put your hopes on that, and hopefully he comes back and ready to go. But not really has happened there. Rashawn Jenkins, he got injured, I know, but. And these weren't big money deals you signed, but that was kind of the point. You signed a lot of low market deals that haven't quite worked. And even in the case of draft, it's been kind of, hopefully Tyrese Knight can make this class look a little bit better, because it's not been the strongest of classes. And even in the case of a guy like Byron Murphy, you got him playing so much nose tackle in part because your signing of Dwayne Hankins and your drafting of Cameron Young in the 4th round 2 years ago have not worked out. So now you're having to force your first round pick to play nose practically 24/7 rather than being able to get the most out of him and have him really light some things up. It's gonna bring out some heat on that side of it. It will. Jordan says, why do people constantly talk about DK being traded? It's not happening. I agree. I don't see it happening. See, Lord of Bravos, I was low-key shocked to see this news this afternoon. Love Dodson. A lot in the press conferences, on the field, not quite as much. Laughing out loud. Yeah, it's great. He certainly said the right things and said things you wanted to hear from your inside linebackers. Seemed like a guy could be a good leader, but it just didn't quite click. That'll happen sometimes. Captain Rex, thank you for reminding me. Please hit that like button, folks. And John Doerr, I think you've got validity behind your opinion on that one. If it could go a couple different directions here, but I think that there's, and this certainly fits the type of history in that NFL organizations, when they got a new coach like this, will go in this direction. And the key is that you have to give McDonald, if you hire McDonald, the second step with that has to be that I'm not just going to hand him an assembly of parts and say, make it work. I want to get the parts that fit to what he needs to accomplish by his vision. And while McDonald has an ability to get the most out of his players, and it's not to say that, well, can't he lean into what this guy does best? Yes, there's a part of that within his defense. But as he said, and as we've heard many times, they can't get past the basics here. They can't get to the advanced stuff because they can't just get to the basics of fill your gap, be a good tackler, play with the spirit of ferocity in your heart of it like you want it. Go watch this Cardinal team and how they play on a weekly basis. It's a team nowhere near as talented as us. Nowhere near as talented as us, in my opinion. But they're going out on a weekly basis because their players play hard every week, and the buy-in is there, and there's no question of that. And he needs to have that same thing, and he'll get a lot out of it if you can give him that. But you know it when it's there and on team. You know it when it's missing. Jordan, I agree with you. John Schneider should be able to build an average offensive line in one offseason. We've seen other organizations been able to do it. And how even this, I'll say, if you don't get it done, just show me the effort towards trying to at least make that happen. Really trying to make that as I say, the point of emphasis, the point of priority as you go into offseason. See, Lord, we haven't heard any news on Abe as of yet. Last we heard, likely to play San Francisco. Last we heard, everything was on track for post bye week play. Hawks Talk says, "Give me Shedeur." Well, that'd be wild. It'd be wild, and they might do it. You never know. Yeah, hand grenade. I don't think Dion would allow Shedeur in Seattle either. He'll go to the south or east coast. I'm okay with that too. I'm with Ricardo on Shedeur. I'm kind of like, He doesn't suck, that's for sure. It's just the carnival that you get with him. Hey, Lisa's Flip Haynes left guard, where strength isn't an issue. Draft a right guard high, OC in the mid with a good free agent center. And Abe plays like he used to. That'd be good. I like your plan. Hey Dara, what's going on, Brandon? No games this past weekend means stress free. I enjoyed just kind of sitting back. I did. We've had some rough weeks. We've had to watch football through and turn over some tough talk with this team, but it was kind of nice to have a week just to go, okay, let's catch our breath. Let's sit back here. Let's take our assessment a little bit. BB says to everyone saying Ryan Grubb has done a not so good job, look at Shane Waldron. Yeah, Shane's been worse. And Shane's definitely confirmed all of our, and I say all of us because there, as I say, rare times we're going to get some actual agreement in Hawk fandom. This one, we all agreed on this one. I took a poll. It was 101% of the fan opinion on this one landed on Waldron not being good. And now we know it's confirmed, and not hard to see why. Watch that the game a week ago between the Cardinals and the Bears, and you just want to see why Waldron sucks. As I said, watch what the Cardinals do and how they play, and then watch how they call an offense and how they lean into the assets that they do have, and then watch him over there just flailing away. No plan, no motion, everything just stagnant. Waldron is he is like the epitome of the guys in like the mutant movies where they get the fast guy running, and the fast guy's running around the guys who can't move as fast, react fast, and that's Waldron while all the other defensive coordinators are running around him like that. And his whole run the ball, protect your rookie quarterback. Don't throw it 50 times a game with a rookie quarterback. You got a good defense to a degree. Lean into that. Nah, I like to throw. I want to throw. I won't pass. Sea Lord of Bravos, this offseason will weigh heavily as to whether I remain a staunch John Schneider supporter. Yeah, me as well, especially when it concerns that damn offensive line, because my patience on that one has run its course. And I'm kind of tired of the excuses, tired of the waiting thing. It's now time to address this in full. CR says, do we think Olu has had enough of a chance to show off at games? He came in as a guy that was supposed to be pretty pro ready. And so that he couldn't overtake the starting job to the point that they signed Connor Williams at the end of training camp tells me that the coaching staff is telling us that he's not good enough. I'm not even sure that the Sundale kid isn't over the top of him on the depth chart at this point at the center position, CR. He might be more of the guy they would go to if they went to an alternative. At least as Mike did say that they thought about kicking Williams to right guard and having someone else step into the center role. Yeah, I'm sure it's possible. I'm sure there's a little bit of that, you going to Connor then and saying we're going to kick you to right guard here as you get it back into that same situation as you did with Dodson. A bit of, I'm sure he doesn't ask to be cut, but he's like, I'm not a guard, I'm a center. And they're like, well, you can't snap the ball. And he's like, well, tough. I'm on a prove it deal that you guys signed incentive laden. I'm going to play center. And you get a little bit of that probably push pull in there. I don't think that we get to the bottom line tax here. I don't think Connor's going to be better at guard than he is at center. And I acknowledge the snapping issues are there for sure, but I don't think it's getting any better over there. BP says, I don't get it. Yes, we signed Dodson and Baker, but there were no guarantee that they were going to be here. And we couldn't throw Tyrese Knight in the fire that early. B, I don't get it. Yes, we signed Dodson and Baker, but there was no guarantee that they were going to be here. We couldn't throw. I'm not sure, BP, on what you were saying on that one, brother. Yeah, it's okay if you had to move off them. They're on 1-year deals. It's, if it's they're not the right bird, they're not, showing you the right stuff. They ain't showing you the right stuff. You got to roll it out. So I'm okay with it. I get it. CR says, I think it's weird we didn't get any trade done with selling Dodson before the trade deadline. Well, we might learn an answer to this if he remains on the open market versus a team picking him up, CR. And I do think a team's going to pick him up. But yeah, we thought maybe you'd get a 6th or 7th for him, maybe, right? From the Bills. Call the Bills back up and say, hey, how about this? It's not in a big contract. Thomas says, we need to understand that if players don't buy in and aren't in the plans, get rid of them, just like 2010 with Pete Carroll. I'm of the same version here. It's more than getting the big place that some people will get on. And I think it's an important part of the puzzle is getting difference makers. Finding, again, the all-pros, those guys that can move the needle. But before I think we get there, we've got to have a collective effort here of everyone grabbing their oar and pulling. That we don't have one guy looking around at everybody else and he's just doing the move, right? The boat's going, technically, right? You got 100 oars. If I just kind of do this motion and I ain't really pulling my muscles, right? I'm just kind of going like this. Technically speaking, the water, it does continue to keep going on the water. You don't go as fast. And what if I got, of those 50 now, I got, 5, 6, 7 of those guys kind of just looking around going, yeah, he's pulling hard. I definitely don't want to give out that kind of effort. Oof. That guy's sweating. He's like, I can see, like, I don't know. I'm kind of hungry. What's for dinner tonight? Hope the wife actually get some meat in the meal tonight. I really could use that. Meanwhile, you got guys over there just, Yeah, it stands out. You need everybody pulling. Get this boat on the open waters. Let's see how far we can go. Ricardo Bradford is bad. He's become famed in Seahawk lore now, Seahawk fandom lore, for just his willingness to sort of just stand around there. There's an old guy, Mark Hunt in UFC, who used to be famous for when he would, big old guy, right? I think from New Zealand. And when he would knock guys out, he'd knock them out. And the whole UFC thing is when you hit the guy, it's the brutal thing is you hit the guy and he falls down. He's obviously been knocked out. And then you do this dive move with a flying fist to then just give him a couple of extras, as he's that move they do, right? And Hunt was famous for, he'd hit the guy and then he'd just walk the other way. And then they would do the super dramatic, and they would fall over. Well, Anthony Bradford kind of does a move like that on the pro field. But instead, it's when he blows a block, where his other linemen will instantly turn around and kind of look like they're at least doing busy work to try to get, I'll push him off my quarterback as he's tackling my quarterback. Now, that kind of move, Bradford will just kind of. And then he scratches his nuts and he goes back to the huddle. Yeah, there's a lot of those cuts. There's a lot of those cuts at Bradford. Another man I don't think is going to be long for the right guard world here in Seattle. Three hours says, I genuinely don't understand how Haynes can't beat out Bradford. Surprised myself on that front because Bradford's not developed this year. In some ways, he's regressing, or at least just staying exactly where he was last year, and that's not good enough. You would think a third round pick, even a rookie, would be able to overtake that, but the coaching staff does not believe so. Thomas says, I was really impressed with the Cards and frustrated with how the Cards played compared to the Hawks. I'm the same way, Thomas. I was having a talk with Big Country about this last night over on my Twitch channel a bit, speaking to this and just how watching the Niners and the Rams win this year and be good and start to get it better, it sucks. You hate to see it, but you understood it. The Cardinals, not just being better than us, not just being at the top of the division, but on a weekly basis, putting an effort level out on the football field that is more consistent and beyond our own team to a measurable place. That's been one of the harder swallows for me on this year. That's a bitter pill getting stuck right here in the gullet. That's a hard one for me to accept. John Pew 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 Gannon has his team playing harder than ours? That blue-haired fan base? Make it make sense. And indeed, that's the thing with Haynes in this. Nagasa is that he was bad in even sample size. So as bad as we might look at Bradford going, he just stands there. He just gets whooped off the blocks and then he stands there and he stares into space, He needs to have, the guy at the statue needs to be Bradford's face, right? The guy at the statue in quiet contemplation, right? That needs to be Bradford's face on that statue. And unfortunately, Haynes has been worse. CR says, why the F will we draft Haynes when there was Pooney and Zinter still on the board? Uncertain. And much of like we saw with Olatimi, Haynes was supposed to be a ready-made guard. He was supposed to be a guy who had 2 years of straight starting experience. He wasn't Bradford, who'd only had 13 starts coming out. He was supposed to be raring and ready to go. It makes no sense. BP says Cam Ward or Jalen Monroe would be the picks. Possibly. Everybody's going to be in play at the quarterback position. That's for sure with this draft. Zornson says, college ball been good this year. Never watch it. College football is always a bit of some weekends I can sit and watch and I really like a lot of what I see. Sometimes I'm just bored to tears. It's been exciting because of the unpredictability, I think, this year as much as anything. Feels like even small programs sometimes have a chance in these games. Chris says, my draft crush has to be the guard Booker from Alabama. If someone like Cam Ward, Milroe isn't available. You know what, man? I think that I've started, guys. I know I was lazy as F. I'll own it. I was lazy as F this year, and I did not get my stuff going. I thought I had this guy. There we go. Boom. I went and saw Booker the other night, Chris. So I checked him out. And right now, for the record, I like me all three of the Bama interior offensive linemen are fine. I'm good with all of them. All three of them. If you really, I don't know if any of them is going to be a star necessarily, but I'm fine with all three. But Booker, typical Alabama offensive lineman, ideal size, good strength, really good strength and length. It just sets an excellent anchor and pass pro. He shoots his hands takes real maximum advantage of his length. Great, gets movement in the run game. Something that stands out is that, just his guys getting moved off the ball. True left guard. He's not a soul taker as far as the run game goes, but he gets push, he gets the job done, and you're not going to blow him backwards. You're not going to shoot a gap past him and sneak by him that way. He'll get in front of you. 6'4", big 6'4", 320 guy, great size there. He's not the most athletic guy, but he's comfortable moving in space. And if he gets his hands on the smaller guys, he's going to throw him out the club. He's one of those guys, he just barely has to tap those smaller guys and they're going to go flying. Probably better in pass pro than as a run blocker. But if we're going to stay committed to running the spread style system, then you're going to lean to want to have better pass protectors than run blockers with what you want to see leaning as a trait. And as a run blocker, he's not bad. So you want to go with that? You want to say, and have all the pundits tell us this is a second round guard that you shouldn't have taken in the first round? I won't cry a single drop. I won't be like that Indian on that commercial with the trash in the 70s where just one single tear because it's, everything's getting trashed in the country. I won't even be like that. I'll stand up and I'll applaud. Probably too early, but I don't care. I don't care. And I do feel pretty comfortable with these guys, all three, where the initial view on tape with all three of them is that they should all be NFL players. I don't know where they're going to land as far as their final full outlook yet, as far as their projection goes, but they should be NFL players. Dara says, if the Hawks got a top 5 pick in the draft, would you go best O lineman or best D lineman, or would they trade back? I would imagine that John would probably trade back. I will say that Dara, I'm getting the sense that there's there's like 8 guys that we would consider what I would call Dara blue chip prospects, because you always every year have to make the delineation between first round prospects and blue chip prospects, because there's never 31, 32 blue chip prospects. There's never 40 blue chip prospects. You get like 14 on a good year, and on a low year, you're going to be about 8. And we're on a low year. We are on a low year, no doubt about that. And that may drive that a little bit, Dara, from John's perspective, to where he says, well, I'm trading back in a draft that's not particularly strong to pick up an extra second round pick. Now, if it's to get a future first Dara, that might be something that pushes the needle for him to say, ooh, I get next year a first round pick. I can package. I can go get my quarterback then. Bop, bop, bop. But I would think because of the nature of the low blue chippers, if he trades 5 to 12 Dara, he's now left the blue chip range. Then that means the equivalency back to you as far as your trade returns has to be well worth it then, doesn't it? Otherwise, you're giving up on a real difference maker. And when we do backtrack this conversation, toughness and buy-in and all that's an important part of this. But you know what we need as well, and it's the secondary part that will come to this, is we need true difference makers. We've got good young prospects on this team. We have good young prospects on this team that might develop into becoming those difference maker types, but they're not there yet, really. So we've got to find more. And how do you find more of those guys? By picking in the top 5 in an NFL draft. That's a good way to do it. Good question, Dara. There isn't a simple answer on that one. This is, I don't really want Abe to come back and be as dominant as he was. He'll immediately elevate Bradford's play. Oh, I really want Abe to come back and be as dominant as he was. He'll immediately elevate Bradford's play, and Williams cannot be jumpy pre-snap. It'll help. I think it does calm the waters even just a bit there, Haley, especially with Cross and his emergence on that side of it. So it will be a boon to the offense. It'll be a boon to those interior offensive linemen if Lucas can come in and play that way. Maybe they go with Jason Peters eventually. He's been quiet. Maybe they come back around to him here at some point. I think Nagasa Abe was really good in those first 10 games, and as his knee started to become problematic and he tried to play through it, and last year when he tried to come back on that knee and play through it, his play wasn't as good as it was through those first 10 games. But through those first 10 games, Nagasa, he had one game, went up against Hutchinson for almost the whole game and completely really neutralized most of what Hutchinson was doing in that game. He was on his way, and that was his rookie year, by the way, Nagasa. So that was the first 10 games of his rookie season playing it that way. So much like we would think with Cross, a lot of reason to believe that that was going to continue to build on that, where he was already a little bit above average to start things out, that you're going to get a guy with some, that's where those are guys you can project out to being those a top 10 right tackle in the sport type player. BP says, I still think you keep Connor Williams relatively still young, coming off ACL injury. Can't give up on him. It's hard to say on that one. There's a couple of these guys, they've got decisions to make on them, and don't know where really the team will lie. I think the snap issues will push this a little bit, but if he continues to get better and better as the year goes along, BP, and the injury situation, if he's more further removed from the timeline of how long it's been since because he had it at the end of last year, he tore that ACL. So you would think by the end of the year, maybe he's getting stronger and better and more comfortable with Geno and the line around him. But it is a possibility. It's much like the Ernest Jones deal. You could see a certainly being feasible that they sign him to a long-term deal, and then you certainly see where it's feasible that they let him walk, run the compensatory game on the other side of it, and look a different direction with it. I do believe he's getting up into close to being 30 years old. So he's not old there, but when you do factor into that, the cost of what he's maybe going to want to be paid, that it may be hard to get quite a deal done on that one. But we got to let that whole season play out to be sure for that one. CR says one of Texas or LSU's tackles, D. Jackson or Milliam, to replace our open spots on left guard, right tackle, and I'm happy with our O-line going into the 2025 season. And we also do know that there is some of this where John, I think, has considered a little bit of going with linemen, and even just recent history here as an option early on, where it hasn't, I think, presented itself for him to have a guy line up. Last year, I do believe that the team was. Who was the guy I was trying to think of last year? I totally spaced out on who I was meant to say. J.C. Latham. I think if J.C. Latham had lasted to 15, Seattle would have jumped on him with 2 feet. That would have been that guy that they would have grabbed. And so they may look to find that kind of guy that is in that kind of mold. It could be a kind of right tackle, left guard type, like you say, CR, and that maybe a guy, as you mentioned, one of the guys you mentioned in this draft. Certainly is possible. Kelvin Banks out there at Texas, potentially. I do see Kelvin Banks as a guy that's got to move to left guard at the next level. He does too much guessing as a tackle with those edge rushers. You can't guess. Not that much. I think he's going to try to shoot far past me prior to the snap. I'm going to get out of my pass set as wide out as I can. Okay, now what happens when he crosses your face? Yeah, but I had a plan that he was going to go wide. Okay, well, now when he crosses your face, you're going to have some issues here. Brian says, that's true, though. Gannon's got that team flying around. He really does. The buy-in is there with that team, 100%. Thomas is in, if Tyrese Knight is close to KJ level in his prime, all of us won't be talking about why did Seattle get rid of Dodson. Correct? Yeah, 100%, Thomas. I think even now it's something that I think people in general principles will support as a move and understand why it was made. They made an assessment. They gave him a half year. They took a look at where he was. He's not a guy that they were going to guarantee to sign a long-term deal. You want to see where he was. And you're making that assessment going, yeah, maybe not. Not enough on this one. Source says, okay, do people think Geno is guaranteed to be number one next season for any number of reasons, contract, or do they throw Hal in the fire? I think that with the Geno situation, Zorn, it's more there's the question of whether you do the extension or not. And that's one that is going to have to probably play out for a full season to see where it lands at the end of the year on that one for that determination. Second part of that is if you don't then go with him, and let's say we move Geno or he moves on, period, that I would then suspect that they would find somebody of equal competitive, place as far as how goes to put out there next year. So if that's maybe a first round quarterback, or if that's a guy out in the league like your Sam Darnold type guy, not him, obviously I would not want him at all, but that then you go get the veteran who's you're looking for maybe the second chance. I think there's a lot of different ways you can go with it, but I don't think that there's any scenario, Zorn, where they walk into next year going, Sam's our guy, is the lead number one, and we've got this fourth round rookie behind him who's not really pushing him. They'll get somebody else to push with him there. That's for sure. Haley says, Hawks Nest, Bradford generally made Tyrel look worse, but they both got eaten alive on stunts. I wonder if they'll try Haynes again if Lucas comes back and is back to form. Well, I'll say there's an argument to be made here, Haley, that I would turn it like this, Haley. You know, you bring Bradford out and Laken Tomlinson out, and you do so with those two guys immediately because you want to be able to run the ball and you want guys that can push guys off the line and create those holes. That's really there at the centerpiece of why you're doing it. You know, in Laken's case, he doesn't offer anything to you as far as an athletic guy at this age. In Bradford's case, while he's tested out as being a really athletic guy, do any of us really have any moments where we really do feel that 98th percentile athleticism from Bradford on the field? I was thinking about this and I don't. For a guy that's supposed to be, you know, big as a bear, but can move like a deer, I don't see it. I don't really see it from him on the field on that. So you come back to, well, if it ain't working with trying to build the drive blockers up front to really roll with this, and with Laken basically like steadying the ship on his level of play where it's not putrid and he's getting it done, basically. You know, it's not difference maker. He's not out there, you know, throwing guys around the line of scrimmage, but he's getting the job done. That you pivot more to saying, okay, look, we can't run the ball. We're finding ourselves at times, a lot of these games in behind where we're having to throw a lot anyway. We do know with Haynes, while he's not going to do anything as far as a run blocker, at least as he settles in as a right guard, that he can be a good pass protector in there. And then you just lean into the aspect that you're gonna throw more, and that's just your identity this year, and that you want to get back to running next year. You're going to have to make some adjustments along the lines to make that really happen. But I could see it, Haley, too. I mean, it's it's a unit that works together, that offensive line. And if you have a guy next year that's awful like that, especially on those stunts where you have to work together with a guy and you guys have to be in tandem with each other in your thought on how you're dealing with it, you can have it where you blow up and you look like the bad guy and it's not as much really on you necessarily. It's hard to tell when there's so many bad parts all the way down the line on it, though, too. Cozina, Jimmy, Bakhtari still available? Can we afford him? It hurts to see other teams being aggressive to get the big playmakers, and we are waiting to get sloppy seconds. Bakhtari's left tackle his whole career. I don't think that he's looking to come out of retirement. I think if he was to come out of retirement, it would probably be to either play for the Packers or the New York Jets. He's also, guys, never played right tackle. So you bring him out here, you'd be bringing him out to play right tackle. And at this late hour of the season, you wouldn't be doing that. But I think he's done, like BP says, 33 years old. I think he's there. Herbert says Donovan Jackson, I thought, was the left guard we're going for. I like Donovan Jackson too. Donovan's nice. I think Donovan's second, third round guy. I think the kid we're just talking about, Booker, probably a second, third round guy too. So they're all going about the same place. But Jackson and Booker are very similar players, Herbicide. Very similar players. NFL-sized offensive linemen. Big, strong, long. Down to get the friction on. I know you guys said it. And then they aren't super athletes like you might really want their left guard as much for the spread, but you can get by with them. They can make it work. Slowby Juan, how you doing, man? Good to see you, Mr. Dog. Are we just going to draft like 5 offensive linemen or what? We might. I wouldn't be against it. Patrick says, how come they aren't trying out the other guard we drafted, the one from Utah? Sa'atoa Lumea is making the transition from right tackle to guard this year. He's also a rookie. I think it's pretty hard as a rookie to get out there and play as an NFL pro anyway. I think if you're asking an NFL rookie to also make a positional change and then play as a rookie at the same time, they're probably going to be in over their head. That'd be my guess for him. But still a long-term prospect development guy there, Patrick. Zorn says, meanwhile, not even ayahuasca can save Rodgers and the Jets. Not even that, man. He's moving on to peyotes, Zorn. Ayahuasca was so last year. Peyote. That's the new hotness. That's where it's at. He's just got to get Devontae to do it too. Jordan says, I'd say we take BPA, but if it comes down to it, either reach a little or trade back and take the offensive line. I'm with that. I'm still much in favor of BPA for sure, but I also like a little bit of the thought process of trading back to BPA. I think last year they did fall in love with Byron Murphy. I did at the same time think that there were some legitimate offers on the table for them to move back and pick up those extra picks that then would have allowed them to address the offensive line with some more quality guys early on if they had taken that approach instead. And so I'm okay with either way, but there's a couple different ways to get to that fulfillment. Ricardo says, I need a dose of Schadenfreude. Please let the Dolphins beat the Rams. Please. That would be beautiful. That'd make me laugh. Jordan says, if Abe plays the rest of the season without any issues, we can roll the dice with him. Oh, we can, Jordan. And what's nice is you don't have to sign him to a long-term deal necessarily at that point. You can, and you're going to save a little money getting out a year ahead of it, but you have the leverage of that final rookie year of his deal to get another year out now. You got us a half season. Now get us a year, and then we'll make the determination on if to, give you that big market deal. Connor's only 27? My bad, Hans. I aged him by a couple years. Seth says, can we get a decent O-line before we start saying bench Geno? No quarterback is going to succeed behind the O-line, and we have a good back and K9 being wasted. Yeah. Geno was one of those topics of conversation that for me, I touch on a little bit, Seth, with it, and I know there will always be people in my chat every time I go live that'll talk about, him a little bit of more of the centerpiece. I haven't seen as much in the chat today, but it's always going to be a little bit out there for some, and that's as much because the quarterback position just captures the imagination of so much of fans of this sport and becomes kind of a bit of an end-all be-all, I think. And then that becomes, I think, tethered a little bit to a bit of an anti-Geno sentiment that exists out there. But agree with you on this, that I think when it comes to the offensive line and making an evaluation of the quarterback position or thinking about the quarterback position as the center point right now, as far as the main issue at play, it's something we have to figure out and decide upon this offseason, but really where the plan has to begin with, in my opinion, is this offensive line first and then dealing with the defense even, and then you can kind of get around, okay, what's the plan to the quarterback position then? But you got to figure out those first two parts and how the details of those first two parts are going to be brought to play before we starting with quarterback and then getting to those other two parts. I do agree, Jordan. I don't think that we can assume that Christian Haynes is going to be good at left guard. And this is coming from a guy that thought initially when I scouted him that he would be a guy that would be able to transition to left guard because of his skill set. But my belief on Haynes at this point is that he's going to be a right guard into the future. He is one of your weird, odd pass blocking right guards. When you go over and play left guard, something that stands out about it is that you are getting a lighter defensive tackle by and large that you're dealing with. You're not dealing with a 340-pound one tech who's just can kind of overwhelm you a little bit if you've got a one-on-one and with the power with you, and you've got to be beefy to be able to counterpoint that. You're going to get a 290, 295-pound defensive tackle that's going to be a little twitchy. But then there's still going to come that point in time you're going to need to move that guy off the line of scrimmage. Not all of the run game is going to work to the right-handed style of things. And so when you come back left, you're not getting as much help at left guard as you would at right guard with the nose tackle. You're more in one-on-one situations as a left guard. So you're needing to push guys off the ball then. And if you have a complete inability to do so, and I would say at this point, he might develop a lot more strength. But again, Haynes came into this league as a kind of finished product. He's not a guy that you look at and go, there's all this upside here available, whereas he's supposed to come into the really high floor point that he's supposed to be at. And in his high floor point, you knew coming in on it that there wasn't going to be as much there in the run blocking game. So I worry a little bit of that. You put the deficiency of his game on a brighter spotlight at left guard, whereas yes, the pass blocking part of it can hold up pretty well and he can handle those 3 techs and pass protection. It's just that the negative of him then as a run blocker will make your offense very predictable now, that anytime you go to the run game, you essentially you're going to have to drive your center over to your left guard to make sure that you're getting movement there. Even maybe at times when the play is not going to that gap. And now you're needing to lean on the right guard to be able to handle a nose tackle one-on-one, especially in the run game, which is not a fun task. But I'm open to it. Maybe the coaching staff goes that way with it. Just my read on it here as we look at it right now. BP says, but Haynes, whether he plays right guard or left guard, offensive line doesn't pay off until year 2 or 3. I mean, it can, BP. I mean, the thing is people are looking at the example. And I think it's a valid one to say that you have the Niners getting top 5 right guard play out of Dominic Pooney right now. Logan Bruss in your own division right now is playing all right for the Rams here starting off. I think there are some rookies that are playing, Frazier with the Steelers at center is playing pretty well initially. I mean, I could probably go through a couple of linemen from even this last draft that are, I do think your point stands. I do, but you can find, if you're targeting the kind of player, and this is where we come back to, who was Haynes coming out? Who was Bradford coming out? Haynes was supposed to be pro ready. That was kind of the claim to fame there and going with him. And in a lot of ways, the Niners went for the guy that was more of an upside guy, or a guy who hadn't played any guard, that was going to make the transition to guard at the pro level, did so seamlessly. You went for what he should have been the guy to take longer, really, than Haynes on this one. Every case is, we can't paint all those with broad brushes. Every case is individually different, and it depends on the guy you draft and what was the upside of the guy, and where was the guy, and how many starts he had at college level. Where's his age at? It all factors into, I think, not only where you look at his upside, but also how you can feasibly believe then how soon he should or should not start. See, our SeahawksNest, our second round pick could have been JPJ. We wouldn't have had a center problem. No, we would not have, CR. You're right about that. You're right about that. BP says, if we disregard Haynes, then we're back to square one unless we pick up someone in free agency. This comes down to where I think the conjecture on this one isn't, for any of us on this part of it, going to help us necessarily, because we don't know where the coaching staff is at on Haynes. Do they look at it as a year out? Do they look at it as he doesn't have the NFL strength to hold up? It was just a miss. Need to give him some time. It could be all of these things. It is hard to say. I think that the coaching staff, BP, is in a position of saying, we're not seeing it from him this first year. We thought the immediate returns should be there for this guy to at least be ready to start day one. Not maybe be a difference maker, but be ready to start day one. He's not there. We don't know if he's going to get there. I think that you still have him on the roster as a piece that you hope develops along, but then you don't necessarily count on him. You don't necessarily rely on him to make that leap into year two. And quite frankly, I'd say that's where we as an NFL roster recently have gone wrong, where we have a player who didn't necessarily sparkle that first year, who then you sort of count on in year two to make that leap just magically. And then when it doesn't happen, we all get disappointed by it, but you could see how that leap was not really going to happen because you had nothing tangible to base it upon. Darrell Taylor, we did this like 2 years over, where we drafted him. We were like, haven't seen him. He'll be able to fill in for the loss of Clowney, right? No problem. Boom, let's go. Oh, he had a rod in his leg taken out. He's going to have to wait a year. Okay, by the time he comes back next year, we're gonna piece him together. And then what? We'll put him together with like Bruce Irvin and Benson Mayowa. And then our pass rush will be great with those three guys as a combination. We'll go something like, it's like, you never saw it. You can't base it on something unless you see it on the field. And maybe Haynes will get an opportunity here before the end of the year to do that. But considering how bad this line's been previously, and by what I'm advocating for here, BP, which is to say, go up over the top. Don't go up to the line. Don't go up to bare minimum mark, because that's what you've done in prior years. And the bare minimum mark in prior years would be to say, well, we'll get Bradford another year under his belt here. We'll rock back with Haynes. We'll go sign a $3 million free agent out there for right guard, and we'll let the three of, strength in numbers, right? One of them is bound to filter out. And I think that's the approach that's been a bit broken here for your Hawks recently when it comes to that offensive line and their approach. You gotta pay for quality there. You gotta really reinforce the ranks for depth there in this age. Addicted Brandon 12, sorry, I'm late to the chat. Wasn't Dodson one of the higher rated defenders according to PFF? This move confuses me. He was last year. He's more middle of the road right now in where he's standing. So he's like 34, 35 or something like that this year's ranking. But last year, indeed, he was one of the highest rated PFF. I think he might have been the highest rated linebacker by PFF last year. But he's been about 20 points off that this year. Three Hours says both Georgia guards, Ohio State kid and Bama kid would be all nice. Kind of hard to miss. Yeah, 3 Hour. It's kind of get me encouraged for this draft. I've walked in as I'm starting the scouting process, and I've looked at a few of these guys, but especially the interior line. And everybody's saying, "Oh, it's a weaker group year for the draft. Weaker group year." It's like, well, I don't know. I'm kind of digging these guards and even the center. A couple centers looked at started off here. I'm kind of feeling them a little bit. So, yeah, folks, second, third, fourth round, you want to go line this year. Not only is it that you may be doing so to address the gaping hole of a need that you have there, but also because there's truly the BPA best player available on the board might very well be an interior offensive lineman where you're picking in the draft in these spots. Maybe it's not going to be as deep a group, but they're good so far to me. Donovan Jackson, Booker, all the Georgia guys, all three of those interior Bama guys are. All of them caught my eye. They all look really technically sound, capable of running a variety of different things, capable of moving in space. They play physical, violent. They get movement at the point of attack. I mean, kind of all the base things that you'd want from your interior offensive lineman, they do bring to the table. I don't see any maybe like star difference maker. They're just going to be giving the wow factor, but they'll get the job done. Haley says, I could be misremembering, but didn't we all expect Haynes to be a left guard? And then we saw Bradford play. I thought this offseason, Haley, yeah. I thought after we drafted him that the eventual plan on this would be to move him to left guard, that he'd be able to unseat Laken Tomlinson because of the fact that he was a good mover in space, first Laken being very kind of in place at this point, not as mobile at this point in his career, playing, 12, 13 years in the sport. But I also had a little bit of a thing on this, Haley, of going back and looking at that second look of tape after the draft and really looking at him again and trying to evaluate him as far as looking, Haley, at the guy that could be the guy who could transition to the left guard spot. And that, as I've always said on this, there is a very big difference between left guard and right guard. It is not merely just, well, you're a guard. So if you're a right guard, then you can just do left guard. It's the same thinking as to think that, well, you're a left tackle, so then you can be a right tackle. And if you're a right tackle, you can be a left tackle. And they are two different positions and two different requirements. And the left guard position is one where you're not going to get as much help. And with Haynes on his college tape, there's a lot of help there. And that's atypically what you're going to give to the right guard. But when you didn't give him that help, and when he was in one-on-one situations, I'm talking as a run blocker here, it was not a pretty situation. He's a shield blocker. He's a guide director, where he wants to guide the guys. He's penetrating and sort of just move them sort of past the running back. And you can't always do that at the pro level, where it's like, okay, he's got me on penetration, but now I'm going to kind of ride him into the direction I want him. Sometimes you get away with that. Sometimes you're going to ride him right into your running back, or have to force your running back to have to reroute because you tried to ride him, and use that sort of way. It's a little finesse. His style is finesse. He wants to be a pass protector, a pass blocker. This is all fine. He can still be a good pro. I'm not down on him with it. But when we talk about going to left guard there, You've got to be able to push guys off the line on one-on-one. You get an easier job there. You get a guy that's going to be 30 pounds less than the nose tackle, but it's also a little bit of a harder job because you don't get as much help. Daniel Barry, how you doing, man? BP says, can we say that Snyder has addressed the offensive line? And I say that Justin Britt, Mark Lewinsky, Ethan Posick, all three have moved on to relatively have good success. Yeah. Addicted says maybe put some incentives into Bradford's contract to lose weight, speed conditioning, Haynes incentive, bench press, squats, etc. You could. I think there's a part of this that as a general manager and head coach, you go, I don't really want to have to incentivize that. I want that fire to be inside that guy's belly already. And if it's not, then maybe he's not the right guy. You know, if I've got to tell you to get going, I got to tell you to click into place, to lock it in. That's the part I don't want to have to, I want to teach you the details. I want to teach you the technique. I want to teach you make sure your fundamentals are sound, but I want to have to teach you the spirit. Jordan, thank you for the $5. Oh, wait, I spent that one there. Washington Fish Quest, thank you for the $5 donation. I watched the 5 way behind friendly lines. I watched the... You were very classy in your silence when the Canadian gentleman claimed to be the biggest DK guy in here. Yeah, no, I did for sure. I let him have that one, as I am definitely the biggest DK guy in here. But I really enjoyed it. If you guys get a chance, we did a roundtable discussion this last Saturday with the Hawk Zone, Cigar Thoughts, and Seahawks Forever podcast, and Viennes. All of us were able to lock up, and be able to talk a little bit about this team. I think there was a lot of very much consensus here by our outlook on this team, from Gino to DK to the offensive line to the approach of the team as we go forward. And I think that's also speaks to a little bit of the clarity of the situation itself, where as a bit muddled as the team has been in its outlook of a bit up and down and middle of the road overall, even though, you know, we are in last place technically, but 4-5, but the issues are clear and what needs to probably be addressed here as we move into the offseason. But thank you. Appreciate you watching Fish Quest, and I had a great time. We got to do that again for sure. Haley's TheSeahawksNest. I think it's really worth mentioning that Haynes was next to our 4th string right tackle and Stonefoot as a rookie. That's a tough ask, man. It's not easy. It's not easy, but I also think that there's a part of this too, where it's, you know, you can't just say, well, that's where all the performance was, why he's not able to even be up to snuff to push a guy like Bradford out of the lineup, you know, because there does come a point in this, Haley, where the coaching staff's looking at these guys at practice every day and they're going, Bradford's the better option. And that's the more of what it speaks to almost here, is it's more of the fact that rolling with a guy like Bradford, who's not taking any step forwards in his game right now, versus not willing to roll with him on that. That's the part that I think is the most telling. It's certainly, you're going to be impacted by the guys around you. When we got Dwayne Brown in here in 2017, the line was in horrible shape across the board. And in many ways, he kind of steadied the ship in his own, just landing here and being able to just, everything gets solidified from there on. You know, your guys got back into the right roles. You didn't guys have guards playing left tackle. It kind of worked. But I think it is telling at this point, when you're halfway in the year and you've had one of the worst performing offensive lines in the NFL, you have the worst performing, Haley, just about right guard in the league right now in Bradford. And this guy can't, the coaching staff looks at that guy practicing every week with the 3rd round pick and goes, go with that guy again. That's to me the part where it's, unless we're thinking our coaching staff's completely inept and unable to properly disseminate the talent of what is good and what is bad, and who is ready and who isn't, then we've got to say, boy, there's a bit of an indicator in that, just a bit. But you're not wrong in that you're going to be affected by the supporting parts of what's going on around you too. Regardless, as Haynes was pancaking defensive ends at the Senior Bowl, maybe he can be salvaged if he gets some more bulk on his frame. There's time. We're not needing to sell on Haynes. I'm not saying we got to release him or move on, but just merely that we can't necessarily count on him as a number one next year. You can't go, if this holds true, if Bradford plays this year out, we can't go into this offseason just counting on the fact that Haynes is definitely going to develop. He's definitely going to get stronger, and so he'll be set and ready to go by next year. I know. Strengthen it up. Strengthen it up, in my opinion. Kieran says, guys, no one's saying starting rookies isn't a tough task, but there are starting rookies all over the league making big impact. Look no further than 2 rookie defensive linemen who kicked our ass last game. There we go. Haley says, it's not just being a rookie, it's asking a rookie to start next to a center who has been bad and a right tackle that is a turnstile, or a right tackle that's just removed from being a D2 school kid. I'll definitely acknowledge it impacts it to some degree. And that'd be just the place where we are. Whereas I'd say there's, again, the part to this that we can't get around where, Haley, is the fact that they're running with Bradford. So and that's the part where we sometimes, I think we can get caught in these discussions where we get to a certain spot where we're like, okay, well, we got a bit of a definitely sharp disagreement. Okay. We're watching Bradford, captain stand about, captain, whoops, I got whooped, and I'm just going to look around like Frankenstein. And the coaching staff goes, that's our guy every week over your 3rd round kid. And it affects it. It does. But there's no kind of getting over that part of it. You don't have a strength or rock. You're not rocking even a Laken Tomlinson where you say, well, you've got a 33-year-old guy. At least he knows the game. He's not going to get confused by stuff. You got Bradford, who's raw as the day is long and regressing this year from where he was last year. And he was raw last year too, you know. Haley says, you want to talk about Pooney's success, but he's been successful with defense and decent offensive line stability around him. Yeah, stability is a hugely important part, Haley. These are all parts that go into it, but there's no one thing that dictates this series. So I think the thing that we may have a disagreement here is that your guys around you aren't going to fully dictate your level of performance. I mean, at the end of the day, are you blocking the guy in front of you or are you not? And, you know, with his failures, when you talk about the guys around you sucking in pass protection, that's where really you're working with your other guys by and large. There's a little bit of run game working with the double teams, combo blocks and whatnot, but a lot of what you're doing in the run game is, you know, do you get the guy pushed off the ball or not? Or is the guy pushing you? Or is the guy getting penetration? And that's where that's not going to have anything to do with the guy around you necessarily. That's you just missing your block in the run game. And that's been the whole of Haynes's run game, or, you know, and how he's looked out there is he's been atrocious as a run blocker. Not merely bad, but atrocious. So it will affect it, but that's not gonna make a guy who's a good player suck. Let's put it that way. That's not gonna be a guy who could give you a Pooney. It would be like to say, well, if we just gave Haynes the support, if I could take this to where you're taking Haley, if we just take this logically, if I just give then Haynes the supporting cast of what the Niners have around Pooney, then I'd be getting somewhat of the same performance out of Haynes. And that's where I couldn't go on that one with it. Or even say that he'd be even close to where Pooney's been, he's playing legitimately like a top 10, top 5 right guard in the sport this year. That wouldn't be my expectation for Haynes, but play league average. I think that's not a huge, for a guy that was supposed to come in as a ready-made, ready to go offensive lineman. That's not a huge request. That's not I think an out of control request. And again, for the guy that's playing us alongside him being the Bradford. Here's his grade. 65 is league average in this sport. You got a guy like Pooney probably pushing up 75, 80 grade for you. He's doubling the grade of Haynes. I can't go to that's just supporting cast to it on it. 48 as an overall block grade, 50 as a run blocker, 53 as a pass blocker. So even as what he's supposed to be as good as, he's not been good. And when you look at development over the course of the year, it's almost dropped off a cliff from week 6 onwards when you had him out there playing. Now those are sample snaps a little bit, so let's not take too much on those. But the cumulative is when you put him out there, he's He's been worse in his grade. He's been worse by his look than what Bradford's been. And Bradford's not a good player. Bradford's a league worst guard. That's things we got to get to. It's like the discussion I get to Haley sometimes about talking about the Geno thing, where the people that would be in opposition to me on Geno would say, well, okay, so the Lions, whatever. Yeah, it's kind of a, like somewhat bad. No, it's a league worst kind of crew. It's that bad. It's backup crew across the board, exception for like a cross type and what you're getting from a performative side of it. And so that guy can't crack that lineup. That's a little bit more than just, well, it's just a guy that needs a year. And again, we just come back to pushing the discussion of what we're really trying to say here, Haley, on this. Let's get to the consensus on this. We just don't count on him this offseason. We just don't say, hey, we're rolling with Haynes next year because that next year of development will come. Because then what we're really doing is we're saying we didn't see it, but because we once made this guy a third-round pick and the tape looked good back in college, that we think it's going to come in at given a yay point. That's the pathway, in my opinion, to it failing. That's the pathway, Haley, in my opinion, to seeing recent failures on the offensive line and continuing to go down those treks, continuing to keep rolling with a guy like Jermaine Ifedi year after year after year after year when you knew he wasn't a good right tackle because he got a first-round status. So that's why I pivot hard. That's why I push hard on this one, is because I don't want to keep making the same. I'm a big don't make the same mistakes kind of guy. I have hope for Haynes. I'm not bailing on Haynes. But at the same point in time, double dipping back down on Haynes and saying, hey, you're running with him as your starter in the future, either left guard or right guard going through this offseason, will be another pathway back down to creating an atrocious offensive line if that's going to be their approach. We've got to go past that bare minimum line. And that means not just relying on what we got, but reinforcing what we got, bringing a true challenge in there to push. And Bradford's not pushing Haynes right now. Bradford's just kind of getting the job by default. Ethan, Hawks Nest, I think as the fans, we get excited about certain signings and then they turn out to not be good, which calls that we should probably have a higher standard, in particular to the O-line. I think as fans, we get excited about certain signings and then they turn out to be not good, which calls that we should. Yeah, I mean, my thing with the offensive line on this is that you're going to get signings wrong. You're going to get draft picks wrong. Every organization does that. So I'm not driving for my organization to get to perfection on how they draft. What I'm trying to get to with my organization is the openness of an imagination on how you build that crew up. I've talked about this ad nauseum. I don't know. I probably don't get much traction with it. There's 3 ways to build an offensive line. You can either draft, you can trade, or you can sign in free agency. And when we talk about trading or we talk about signing in free agency, we're talking about value here. Okay. So I don't want to hear about Laken Tomlinson and George Fant and some other, secondhand dollar store type of addition you're making that costs you nothing, that you have no future risk on the board on your cat. It's the completely buy low, hope big kind of thing. I mean, it's the thing that we've been watching the Mariners organization do on the baseball side here for years now. And so that's the pathway they've taken. And the problem with the Haynes thing, as I said, is not just that, like, whether Haynes is good or bad. The problem is that you put all your eggs in that basket. You don't want to go make the trade. You don't want to sign the great free agency. So you go and you make this pick and you go, it's all on you, buddy. Like if this thing's going to, roll or not by you, because, we probably know Bradford's probably not stepping forward. You don't go right back to a right guard after you pick this guy in the 4th round and 3rd round if you thought that guy was going to be the guy. It's that bare minimum approach. And so that's what we're really pushing to advocate for here, more beyond the individual player of Haynes. It's about taking this positional group from being one that's been minimized. We hear about inside linebackers, running backs, and safeties being devalued in the sport. Our organization has devalued the offensive line because they only use one method of approach to try to make the unit good. And they don't develop well enough to utilize that one drafting method of approach to get it done. They don't have a good enough track record to make that happen. And this is where it really is. It's not about shaking the finger. It's more about, well, how do we pivot this forward? What's the way you go forward on this to get to the right returns on this that's going to, make this line really good? And that's where I push on this, just say, let's not make the same mistakes we made before on this. And you can look for the last 10-year period, and we can go season by season and offensive line by offensive line. And I can cogently track through there a philosophy in place that has remained pretty much unchanged. And it's not worked. It's brought about league worst crews on the often. Joseph Miller, do you think John is in sync with the coaching staff that's supposed to develop these O-line players, or is he playing like John knows best? I don't know for sure on that, Joseph. It's a great question. I'm not too sure on. I think he's trying to get the chemistry right with the new coaching staff, and that there's always going to be a bit of a feeling each other out and learning each other and where you need to be. Some of this, I think, when it comes to the offensive line, is his developed evolution of thought over time. I don't think that John's just bad at drafting the offensive line. I think that John has an approach to the offensive line, which has led us to where we're at. And that approach was evolved over time. The spread systems that had taken over college, the so much pass protection, so little run blocking, making it so much harder to evaluate and discern these guys. I think that there's just some different things that have made going after linemen more difficult than ever. And he's tried to take a more creative approach than just kind of paying prime assets to get the thing in place. And it's not worked. And that's where the pivot needs to come in place. So I think it's more philosophy driven through the years on this one, Joseph, when it comes to just the offensive line. But I'm unsure overall on that. Anon Moose. I like that name. Who is the Seahawks linebacker now? That would be Tyrese Knight's going to take over for Dodson at outside. And if Knight were to go out, then you'd go with Josh Ross, the guy they signed, former Michigan guy, former Raven guy, very familiar with the defense. Ethan says we need a higher standard for JS when it comes to the offensive line. If he signs a couple guys, that's not good enough. If he gets the sloppy seconds, not good enough. We need to hold him to a higher standard. I agree. Yeah. BB, John has been decent. Offensive line, Damian Lewis, Glowinski, Britt, Ethan Posick. We give up on because they were playing up to a standard. So BB, if you take a general manager in a place for 15 years, you're going to find a couple of guys over that time if it just by 15 years a period. But I don't know if any of those things are what I would call BP smashing success stories that are indicative of him being able to build a decent offensive line. We don't have to go to grab individual players. You can look at the unit by large on a given yearly basis and how they perform to make the proper evaluation about how the team's playing. I think if we're just sort of grabbing the semi-success stories here and there, that's not really going to really tell the whole tale of what's going on here, and then we're not making the proper evaluation of how to fix it. Even the guys that you mentioned on that list. You drafted Damian Lewis, who's a great right guard, then you move him to left guard. You draft Justin Britt to be a right tackle. He fails out at right tackle. You put him at right guard. He fails out at right guard. You put him at center, and then he kind of plays good for you there 1 year, gets a contract, and then doesn't play up to that standard again for you at that center position. Has he gone on and played okay elsewhere? Yeah. Ethan Posick couldn't start here through the first couple of years out of LSU. A guy that you played out of position at guard. You eventually begrudgingly moved him to center. He was okay here at center, highly injured, but not a success story. And in Glowinski's case, had a couple years with the Colts, pretty good there. But I mean, I don't think any of these guys are all pro types or perennial Pro Bowlers or difference makers. On their best of days, maybe they're around league average. And a lot of where they're at on most of the time is around kind of their worst of days, which is below league average. So, I mean, you give a guy 15 years in a spot as general manager, you can find some individual success stories of offensive linemen, but that's a long period of time for a lot of different offensive lines to turn over. And for those to be your shining success stories, I think speaks to a bit of the failures there that's gone on there with the offensive line, more than they would say to me the success. I guess I would ask, BP, do you look at this as the last 10 years, this offensive line's been league average? It's been a decent offensive line when so much of the data from how the run blocking data to the pass blocking data tells you that it's not been that? If you feel that way, I guess, what would you base it upon? Is it just eye test the way of what you're seeing and you're thinking that? Because I don't see him open a lot of holes. I don't see your quarterback given a lot of time by and large to get much done, but yeah. Brandon agreed about JS not wanting to give incentives, but doesn't Geno have incentives, DK or K9? I'm not sure about. Edge rushers, any incentives? He does incentives in there. I don't know on the DK or the K9 one. It's player dependent. And I think on the Geno one, they're trying to come to a creative middle ground of compromise between what Geno wanted and what Seattle wanted to pay. So he's given out incentives before, but it's case by case. He doesn't have like a uniform way he rolls it on that. Ricardo says the Rams secondary is as bad as the Seahawks offensive line, and yet some ignoramuses think the Rams are a Super Bowl contender. It's true. Brian says Washington would look good returning kicks for Washington. Washington would look good returning kicks for Hawks. And yeah, Hans, I would think that Dodson probably was. We don't know for sure, but the indicators seem to be on this one, Hans, that Dodson probably was told he was going to be benched, asked to be released. He's going to be a free agent. Probably signs on with a team like the Bills, becomes a starter instantly from them, and it ends out okay for him for a guy in a free agent year. I think there's probably something to that. BP says, I think people forget we had Dwayne Brown, Mike Iupati, DJ Fluker, and Justin Britt, and that was a decent O-line. Like they say that Schneider has ignored the line. I can't agree. Yeah, I think just mentioning players' names, BP, is not really making much of a case on that. Dwayne Brown's a great addition, but part of the reason that you had to make Dwayne Brown trade, BP, was an indicator of exactly the things we're talking about. I think you're overlooking a little bit of how bad the group has been, of why you're driven to go in certain directions you are. Why did the Dwayne Brown trade happen? Did the Dwayne Brown trade happen because you were in the offseason and you had a whole philosophy in place of how you wanted to build the offensive line and how to build it up as a strength of the unit? Or was it that the offensive line that season was such a catastrophe at that point that your offense was so almost unworkable at that point that you had to go make a trade for a Dwayne Brown in order to make it happen? And BP, that's the only trade you've made for a quality offensive line in almost 10 years. Almost 10 years. That was 2017 Dwayne Brown trade. Mike Iupati didn't play well for you. These are names you're mentioning, but there's a difference between mentioning a name and a guy actually playing good football for you. Or as you say, decent. I don't know what your line would be for decent. If you're saying league average, this crew's not been league average. That's you can maybe find a year you can cherry pick in 10 years where they've been kind of around average, but by and large, they're at the back end of the group on this. And it comes down to the fact that they're not putting the adjustment of resources into this. And it's really not an argument here to be made on this one. Mike Iupati, you signed for a league vet minimum deal. DJ Fluker, very similar. As I say with Justin Britt, you didn't land him at center until he was here for 3 years and failed at 2 other positions because both of your lack of player development and the team's inability to properly designate where the right position would be for him, something that's also plagued this organization for years. The offensive line has been a huge problem on a multitude of different places, and it has been for 10 years. Definitely you're free to disagree with it, but you got to make a solider case than telling me that, hey, we've been able to build a decent offensive line because of DJ Fluker and Mike Iupati. Those guys, that's not a good line. That's not a strength of a line. That's not building a league, even up to a league average crew. That's taking guys like we've done this year, again, BP, with guys like Laken Tomlinson or George Fant. You're grabbing guys who are on their last legs. Those last legs are wobbling. Mike Iupati had nothing left with his ankles. Go back and look at all of the injuries he was dealing with us in Seahawks in those final couple of years with his ankles, unable to barely play. And you're trying to squeeze out that final year of productivity, which is not likely to happen. And you can see it's not likely to happen when you make the signing. But the team didn't want to put the true assets into the position because they were spending much money on Russell Wilson, and they were spending so much money onto the defense to try to return over the Legion of Boom. And so there wasn't any money left over. And if you're not going to spend the money, if you're not going to make the trades, and then you're only going to draft, and then you don't develop particularly well, it's not a shocker then when you have one of the league worst units on a yearly basis. That's a tough sell for me, BP. You're going to have to sell me on how the line's been good for the last 10 years, because that's not been one that I've heard as a very common opinion presented here very often. Catil says, do you think the Niners are going to bench Moody after Sunday's game? I don't think they've got a better option to go to, Catil. But it was a pretty funny look with Debo pushing the long snapper back last week. But yeah, you got to hit those kicks. It's tough too, man. What'd they put, a 3rd round pick on that kid? You got to hit those kicks. Elijah Owens, I think I see your comments on there in this, Elijah, and I understand that there's dissatisfaction with the team this year, and that when's the right time to call. I think if you move on from a coach, you got to give this thing a couple of years with the new coach to set before you start making determinations. This guy's not the right guy. We've got to go quickly. I think organizations that spin off coaches on the often are not organizations that atypically tend to be very successful in this sport. So we got to give it the time, as painful as that might be. Got to give it a little bit of that time for this to see where this really will map out. Haley says, Hawks Nest, fair to ask why Haynes isn't starting, but isn't it just as likely that they don't want to kill his development by putting him on the island with no help to pick up bad habits and technique? Is it possible? Yes. Can I think of any recent history, Haley, any recent history of a situation of ever hearing about that playing out that way on an offensive line? Where we have a guy who's good enough to play right now, a guy who's going to give us an improvement at the position over than the guy we got. And the guy that we got the position, again with this Haley, it's one thing if you have a steady vet presence guy there who's kind of playing around league average, and then you have all these bad parts around, and you're saying, yeah, those bad parts around, we don't affect him. We got league average there as it is, so we're just going to let that roll. When you have a league worst right guard, and then he's and the bad supporting parts around the league worst right guard, that's the tough sell part of it to me. Is that the guy you're going to instead of that is awful. It's playing awful. So then that would be one where I'd go, I can't get there with it on that one. If I got the equivalent of even a Laken Tomlinson and how he's playing at left guard right now, at right guard, Haley right there, if that was the equivalency in the level of play, then I'd be right there with you. But because it's as bad as it is, I go, he should be able to crack that lineup. He should be out there with them playing. And again, I don't have any instance I can think of in my mind of a lineman who was good enough to play immediately, but because of the supporting parts around him to either side of him on that line, didn't play out that rookie year because of that. Yeah, 3 hours. Connor's definitely played guard before. As Brian says, I just don't think he wants to. Part of this is that Connor's playing for that contract. He's on a 1-year deal and he wants to remain at center because I'm sure his agent has told him you're going to be paid much better as a center than you would as a guard, especially if you can play as where you've been at in your typical performance as a center in recent years. And so he wants to capture that for this offseason. He probably wants a 4-year, $39 million deal or something like that. And he's not going to get that same if he's slid over to guard. BP says there's a podcast called JB. He's made it clear that we are throwing players into the fire too early instead of letting them develop, and that's why football play is down. Well, it's possible. Certainly is possible. Certainly the NFL is steered in a lot of ways to having the careers shorten and to play the young players quicker. And I would love for that to be the case where you can give them more of that time to develop. I think that this is where we come to at where the lay of the land is the lay of the land. It isn't changing anytime soon. And I don't know if I have a lot of different points. Again, I can go back to players that sat the first year on the line in this modern age where linemen are so important that, sit that first year and then come back and play. There's probably some instances of it. We'll see. I'm glad you guys got that confidence, and I hope he does. I hope Haynes comes back in that way. Like I said, when this really comes down to, I guess this is where I would wonder if for the folks that are pushing back on this with the Haynes thing and that he will be better next year, are you guys advocating for then that the Hawks don't go out and really address the right guard position in lieu of rocking with Haynes? Is that, because let's get to what the arguments are of what we're making here. I'm not bailing on Haynes. I'm saying I'd like to go and really address the right guard position separate of Haynes. And if he could develop around that, then so be it. But are you guys saying that you're good with just trusting the process that next year of development will come and he'll just be good? And then when that fails, you have no backup plan to that. That's what you were riding with on the whole. And can you guys not see that's also then where we failed in recent history on our offensive line by this same approach? So let's push it forward on this discussion if we can with the Haynes part, to maybe then we can get to a point of agreement and understanding on this one. Because I'd like to understand where you guys are coming from on that, because that's a tough sell to me. That we're just, well, we'll come back next year and roll it again on him at that point. Lucy's Pumpkin's liking the move tonight. She is. She's feeling Tyrese. She is. Nick that Brandon, is there any way to find out who does the interior offensive line scouting? Maybe instead of scouting conferences, scout positions? That'd be interesting. I think some of that they do with the conferences has to do with the travel, and you having a scout having to go from L.A. to New York to Washington down to Florida, and that when you keep them into those kind of areas, you can kind of condense how much they're having to move because those guys are definitely, it's a rough life. Those scouts, they're traveling quite a bit, but I think Hutchinson kind of gets a lot of the final call when it comes to some of the offensive line and how they look at it. BB says, when free agency hits, we need guards at least 27 years of age, not 30, 31. See, here we go. We're going to find some consensus here, BP. We're going to find some agreement here. I'm with you on that. This is where I say that this is the place in the path with some of those names you mentioned, the Flukers, the Iopatis, Laken Tomlinsons. You're getting guys into those 30 years old, kind of down at the end of the line. Austin Blythe, kind of at the end of the line. Let's go for the more of the younger guys. And then what will with it take if you're going to go with the guys 27 instead of 31, 32? You got to pay them. You got to spend the money then. And what's the part that we can look at and track over the last 10 years, BP? Who was the big free agent signing that we've made in free agency for the offensive line over 10 years? Just one. Just one. Who's our big keynote signing? Who's the one where we put substantial money on a guy and said, here, we've taken care of it. It's cemented. And it's not a one. It's really not a one. You did Luke Jokel on a 1-year, $8 million deal. But again, that's more of one of those guys. Why he wasn't 30, 31. He had failed at left tackle. He had one, 2 or 3 game stretch of good play at left guard. So you're like, let's give him an $8 million deal. We liked him coming out. But I'm with you. I go younger, go for value, spend the money on value, and you will get the returns back with it. Ricardo says, ideally, we take a right tackle with guard flexibility early in the draft next year. That's right. And this is where I will give the team credit in that I think that they would have taken a J.C. Latham instead of even a Byron Murphy if J.C. Latham had dropped down to 15. And that would have been a guy that gave you that flexibility in just that way, who could play a guard and then could have played some tackle as well, and would have given you some probably equal measure of impact of both. Haley says, I don't know if we'll agree, but that's fine. I'm less concerned about rookies starting right away when I'd rather give them the time to make sure they're not going to pick up bad habits. Don't rely on his. I'm okay with that. Yeah. And we'll see on this. We'll see how it plays out with it. I just want, as I say with this, Haley, to see them really push this ball in a way that they haven't over the past 10 years and to really put a measure of investment into it, like the likes of which we haven't seen in that time period. And I think if we do that, then it will be very successful for us. He says, development for sure. I don't see a 3rd round pick not starting as much of an indictment of Haynes. Rather, I wish we weren't relying on him starting right away. Can't predict Brad's regression. Yeah, I mean, it's the nuanced place I try to get to on this stuff, Haley, where it's not saying a final, it may come off as here's a final determination of Haynes. And my outlook of him is that, he's trash and garbage and I'm done. That's not what I'm saying with it. But what I am saying is that there's also the other side of this. We can look at and say that for a guy that had started 2 straight years of college, who was supposed to be one of the more pro-ready interior offensive linemen coming out of this draft, who is not able to unseat a guy who's playing like a league worst right guard, that doesn't reflect well on Haynes. That doesn't necessarily speak to just Haynes needing a year to kind of sort it through. And that's, as you said, we may just come to be a disagreement on that, but that's why I come to that place where I think there's a lot of validity behind that. It's one thing if it's somewhat stable there in front of him, but it's not somewhat stable there in front of him. And I'm not talking about the guys to his left and right, the guy that he's in competition directly with, and that he can't unseat that guy. And Brett Bradford's been miserable, awful at the position. I mean, Bradford's not only been bad from a standpoint of pressures and bad in the run game, but also one of your top 50 most penalized offensive linemen in the sport. I think he's like 6th. It's like your 6th, the most penalized offensive lineman. There is no good coming out of Bradford's game right now. It is almost a 0 hour plus side of it. Huey's coming in, ready to fire John. What's up, Huey? Addicted says, to be fair, John did a good job with the D-line, extend Big Cat, draft Murphy, cut Darrell Taylor, Josh Jobe, holy F, yeah. But 2025, fix the offensive line. Amen. Three Hours says, I really don't think it's fair to judge free agency offensive line signing last year. And for this upcoming year, we really didn't have a lot of money, and we were pretty much forced to re-sign Big Cat on top of him being good. Yeah, we were. You also spend money though on a guy like Noah Fant. You know, he gave that guy what, 9 million a year, 10 million a year. Why can't that money have gone to a lineman? As well on this trade. As I say, there's three ways to build an offensive line: draft, trade, free agent signing. The one time Seahawks put significant assets into getting a quality offensive line quality offensive lineman over 10 years was Dwayne Brown. It's a trade you made where you wanted to only give up a second round pick. The Texans then, I think, started to feel a little bit bad about only getting a second round pick in return. They came back to John. They said, we just flunked Jeremy Lane's physical. You need to give us now a third round pick back. We overpaid for a 32, 33-year-old left tackle at that time, gave it a third round pick back up. So it's a second and a third round pick. And it was well worth it. John has that success story in his back hip, yet will not walk down that aisle again. And so you can offload resources from one to another. You could have post June 1st Draymond Jones this offseason. Instead, you reworked the contract a little bit. You could have made some tough decisions in one place to pull resources from this place to put more resources into this. They didn't do that. There's always the flexibility to make those kind of decisions. And John was not willing to do it. It's not a road he wanted to go down. And when it comes to this being this offseason 3 hour or next offseason it being that way, this is also how he's been for 10 years. It's not me sample size. Hey, this is how he's been the last year and a half. This has been the approach for 10 years. And now certainly with Carroll removed, and to not be able to say, well, it was Carroll dictating and telling him to do this and telling him to do that, it's on you now. And if you've just been in the same mode here for 10 straight years and it's not working and it's failing on a yearly basis, then I think people have a right to say, you got to change your approach and process. It's defunct. It ain't working. You're taking it just not far enough to where it needs to be. And we're talking about I'm not even talking about making it impactful at this point. I'm talking about pulling it up from the dredges of the league. Can we get this to league average? That's all I'm asking for. I ain't asking. I'd love to have a dominant unit. I'd love for to be able to just run on anybody. Have one of those kind of like Detroit. But I'll just take league average at this point. And even to get league average, we got to utilize these other methods to make it get to that spot. Like Arian says, I can't put this O-line all on John. It's from the ground up, scouting, evaluation, ranking your board, coaching and development. You put it on John because the buck stops there, but our whole process is trash. I think that's fair. Brian says, every team, every year, all positions, some players hit, others do not. It's not even remotely confined to the Hawks. It's true. Haley, you don't get what you pay for in the NFL. That's very false in most cases, but I understand the sentiment. Okay, I'm sorry, you're responding to the chat on that. My bad. Yep, Haley. Lakin's been slowly climbing up into the area of things at 26th. Now, if he can kind of roll in there as the money, sort of, yes. There still is a bit of you signed a guy that wasn't a scheme fit, which is part of then restricting a bit of your offense, for instance, like getting to the edges, pulling guys in space at times. But he's slowly starting to round in a bit better. Misfit says, look at how many teams field good offensive lines or an above average offensive lines because they're scouting and general manager departments. Yeah, it's a big part of that. It is. I'll tell you, when I go and look through offensive lines, most of the time when I'm looking at them, let's go over and peek. Prim grades. So let's take, let's look at these offensive lines here. So we got the Packers. I think they just took a second round pick, the best pass blocking units, second round pick. Garrett Bowles signed, Quinn Miners, tons of investment from the Broncos, Tampa Bay Buccaneers, good amount of investment every year into that. offensive line. They've done so for years there. They did so when Tom Brady was looking at them as the team that wanted to go. And even after they've lost some of the linemen that were there when Brady was there, like your Jensens, like your Donovan Smiths, they have continued to build on that offensive line afterwards. The Cardinals have the strongest offensive line in probably the division right now, overall, and both run. And they've definitely put their share of assets and resources, especially I think at the tackle position. They've got 2 first-round picks. Colts, first-round pick Ryan Kelly, first-round pick Quinn Nelson. The other kid they took, the German kid, first-round pick. Kansas City Chiefs, they pivoted a couple years ago, putting multiple picks, big-time money into that offensive line. Creed Humphrey, second-round pick. He's being paid now at the highest mark of any center in the sport. Buffalo Bills, Osiris Torrance took one of the safer guards in last year's draft, continually always reinforcing into their offensive line. These are teams that are not only at times having a good offensive line right now, but you can see them having a timeline of good offensive lines through years, especially those that might have the same general manager in place in certain spots, because of the fact that they understand that you got to keep investing in it. It takes the investment. It is development, yeah. It is scouting, yeah, 100%. But it's also the brass tacks investment and willingness to put that full investment into it. And that's why I laser lock into those 3 items. You got 3 ways to do it. You're only utilizing one pathway truly, fully, in order to get that done. And if you utilize all 3 methods, you can build a stronger crew up with it. Haley says, like to be clear, the Steelers pay about what we are for an offensive line, but they have a top 5 unit. Yeah, but that's also then the much more resources into it. That's also the much more of the resources that they're willing to put into it. Where we'll throw 1 pick into it a year high, they'll put multiple picks into it. Right? And so what they do with that, Haley, I'm glad you brought that one up, because this is what I talk about this with going past the line of the bare minimum. Because when you go past the line of the bare minimum, now you're able to deal with the losses if you have those guys you were kind of relying on the front side to go. So to my point on this, let's look at this last year for the Steelers, just this last year's draft class for them, just the way they went with the last class. So first round, Fatanu. Second round, center, Zach Frazier. Fourth round, Mason McCormick. Troy Fatano's out for the year. Not going to play a snap. But because you have Frazier there, because you have McCormick there, who's also performing well for them, because they've had other parts of that line on a yearly basis, they will address it in this way where, okay, you're not spending the money, but you will go 1, 2, 3, right? You won't just go 3rd round pick, and then the next year we'll go 4th, 6th round pick. And next year, okay, maybe we'll come back with a late 2nd round pick, maybe. We'll wait a year. You're going every year understanding you got to put that investment in the trenches in that way. You keep hitting and hitting and hitting, and then you can sustain those kind of losses. So let's go back, Haley, to 2012 when Russell walked in the door. When you had him here, when you had the highest paid offensive line, and probably the last time you had a legitimate offensive line in the sport, when Russ walked in. But what was also key about that offensive line? It had been taken past the bare minimum point. The highest paid offensive line player, I believe, on that line during that Super Bowl year, if I'm not mistaken, or at least by the contract you've given out, I think he'd been released at that time or was on IR, was Robert Gallery, one of their big free agent signings in free agency, the guard that they had got brought in. Didn't play, but you had a good line because you built up more past that bare minimum spot. You went and drafted a guy in the 3rd round, I think, the prior year in John Moffitt to be your right guard of the future for this offense. But because you had gone with Carpenters and Okuns, and you'd taken it past that line. When Moffitt was not a success, and almost instantaneously so, you had other guys there that you could fill on in. You had other value you had built on into that offensive line, so you had taken it past that line place. You didn't go to the bare minimum. You took it past so that you could sustain those losses. In the Steelers, they're playing this well this year because if you're not going to spend the money, then you better slam that draft with those picks. You better be like a little bit, and I don't like how the Cowboys run their organization, but I love the Cowboys' approach to their offensive line because this is what they do as well. What did the Cowboys do this last draft? Tyler Guyton, Cooper Beebe. There'll be problems on this Cowboys team going into the future, but one of the problem points is not going to be their offensive line because they put the investment into it. It's really what this is culminates down to me for me on this conversation. It's just get the investment into it. Put the goods in. And Ricardo, yeah, I can never see John handing out a $20 million a year either deal on that side of it. I don't see that either. It's not going to happen. Kieran says, Hawks Nest. Scott Huff, our O-line coach, is also a first-time NFL coach. Can we talk about this for a minute? You bring him because he's aligned with Grubb's offense, but how is so many people on this staff their first NFL job? Maybe something that you need to take a look at this offseason, to your point on that, Kieran. And I'm open if there needs to be a change. I don't speak about it a lot because I just don't know necessarily with it being a first-year offensive line coach. The other thing I'll say with this, Kieran, is that this issue, as I say, goes back so many years that it is very possible that it is that we just had craptastic offensive line coaches all across the board throughout this 10 years that's gone right in tandem with some of the drafting and the spending approach, and that it's all the big part of the problem here. It gets hard for me to just put that on him, though, when I have 9 years of kind of other data that's also telling the same story. And this is where we got to, if I can put the investment in, then I can start to at least remove that as a quantifiable reason for why this thing is in the place it's in. And then I can start to maybe pivot more to being an offensive line coach issue. But I think that's where they've got to make that assessment in-house very, very soberly this offseason on if that is the right fit. I think for the reasons that you give, because there are guys getting their first time NFL head coaching job here, and there may be guys that are just in over their head. And certainly when it comes to the offensive line, with the exception of Cross, you really haven't seen any development from any of the other youngsters. Mrs. says, imagine drafting and signing offensive lines that actually fit your scheme. What a concept. Yeah, I know. I want a spread style scheme. Let's get the 33-year-old immobile guy. But he's cheap. Yeah, but you're not going to be able to, but he's cheap. Haley says, Gino hasn't been injured because he's afraid of what Sling and Sammy Hal would do. This is sarcasm, but we should all be afraid of Hal behind this line. Oh, yeah. Hal would get crushed. Kieran, you have college O-lineman coach who's never been in the NFL running college schemes and then wonder why they struggle with pass pro and pro schemes. True. But we've been struggling with those things last year. I mean, and for years prior to that. But you might be right. They need to address that. Whatever you got to do to get this line right, everything's got to be on the table this offseason. Kieran says, again, you can blame John for his comments and investment over the years, but guys, O-line coach is the single most important position on the coach on the team, I'd argue, and we got our NFL newbie. Well, it does reflect back to a degree on John. He's got oversight on the staff. He can tell McDonald what time of day it is, and John was very, very specific to mention that he has that kind of level of control now over the staff in his press conferences this offseason. And it very well could be part. I will say, Kieran, you've had a couple of different offensive line coaches in here with the offensive line playing it this kind of way. Undisciplined, lack of development, lack of good performance. So it could be the coaches, but that's where cart before the horse to me, chicken or the egg, where if I can check off the box saying that I've done everything as a general manager to give the proper assets to my O-line coach for him to maximize them, then I can put that offensive line coach right in my reticule and say, hey, the scope's on you now. You got no excuses. But if I sort of give him a craptastic offensive line, and in the case of this guy here, Kieran, let's look at this, right? I've got the right tackle, and Abraham Lucas is going to be our main guy, but he's not going to play basically the half the year for what we've been up to this point, so he's out. The backup guy is really a right tackle, and that's what he should be playing, but we're going to force him over to play right tackle, and he's going to proceed to lead the league in pressures. That's not on the new offensive line coach to me, Kieran. You brought in Laken Tomlinson, who's not a scheme fit for the spread style system you want to run, so you have to, at least to some degree, I think, dial back some of the plays you can run with him out there. You have Connor Williams, who isn't with you all of training camp for that developmental process, who comes in late, still not at 100% with that knee, who you're now running out there to start day one for you in your offense as your center, the captain of your line. And you have in Bradford, who was a completely raw guy last year. The last offensive coach wasn't able to develop very much, and you may just be a guy who just never develops. I mean, that might be the one guy you can kind of most point to and say that's his biggest error there, but the other ones are kind of outside of his control. Stone shouldn't be playing right tackle. Probably shouldn't be playing much left tackle, quite frankly. But because we don't reinforce the ranks well enough on that, that's what you end up with. Narc Kelly says, still wishing for Deion Henley, Edrin Cooper, and Cam Kitchens. Yeah, Henley's turned into a pretty good player out there. I think it's for the Chargers. And Cooper looked good. Kitchens looked good. Haley Hawksnest, I think we need to see if JS will do what the Steelers did with multiple picks like that. We haven't really had the chance to. Maybe could this upcoming draft. I would love to see it, Haley. This is where I'm advocating for. And if it wants to be to where it's not spending money, but you're just hitting it with a lot of picks, then hit it with a lot of picks. And I do like there's more investment in the past couple of years to the offensive line. From the draft standpoint, to your point on this, right? 10th overall pick to Cross, 3rd round pick to Lucas. Then you come back the next year. It's 4th round pick to Bradford, 5th round pick to Oluwatimi. Then you come back this year and it's 3rd round pick to Haynes, and then it's 6th round pick Satola Man, 6th round pick Tyrel. So that's decent. That's decent. But there's many more other teams that I can see who do more to put that investment on those lines. And if you were augmenting with a trade, with a big time free agent signing, then you could kind of get by like that. And you look at if I'm not mistaken, on the Detroit offensive line, for instance, I can't remember if they had. Make sure on this before I say this. Make sure I'm right on this one. Yeah, I think he was originally. Yeah. So, is he on the Browns right now? How about that? I want to make sure I'm right on this here. Left tackle? Taylor Decker. There we go. All right. So yeah, we got Detroit, for instance, top 5 pick, Penny Sewell, Taylor Decker, 16th overall pick, one of the highest paid centers league, Frank Ragnow. They were able to find a little bit of more value than us in later rounds, but same thing there where just put the capital into it, put the resources into it. It can be all draft if you want there, Haley, and certainly teams have had success doing that 1, 2, 3 thing. We had it with Lucas and Cross, where they were, until Lucas went down, that was magnificent looking 1st and 3rd round. Jeffrey Thistle, thank you for the $2 donation. Appreciate you. The voodoo magic won't allow us to have a good offensive line. Maybe not. Maybe it was the Wilson curse. Maybe he went down to New Orleans, put something on us. John says, is the Dodson release really what's best for the team, though? I don't think so. Now you're paper thin at linebacker. All this carrying of players doesn't seem to be yielding any fruit in free agency. Not yet. No. I think there's definitely an argument to be made. You're maybe taking a step back this year for the long term of the 2-step forward next year there, John, on that one. CJ says, John Moffitt was a goof, getting drunk and passing out on sidewalks, laughing out loud. He was kind of a goof. Lovable goof, but a goof at that. Misfit says, Bills have a great right tackle, 4th round, Spencer Brown. Why? Scouting. True. They do a great job of development. It's oftentimes something you see from some of these small market teams too, is that's not, I think, coincidental that they do a very good job at Steelers are like this too, of those kind of positions. They tend to get right in their outlook of it, and they tend to develop very well too. Imagine if we ever traded for Adams to try and force a Super Bowl window and try to kept our 2 offensive line. That's the good timeline. Yeah, that would have been a good alternative timeline there, Haley. And a place that you can see, I think, even with Russell right now, and this, I think it was with Russ and both Carroll in this situation that neither could quite get fully synced up with the other in the way that they needed to. It's like both wanted kind of come all the way to my side on it here with it. Russ wanted to be the high volume passer with the great offensive line, Carroll wanted to rebuild his defense and then Russell get by so he can put his assets back into his defense to return it over. And what really probably should have happened in all of that is that you roll down Russ to more of a low volume passer, but you maximize him to the ultimate in doing that, and then get him the offensive line that can allow him to work behind that at the same time. Maybe then weakening a little bit of Carroll's defense to a degree than he would have liked from a resource standpoint. But I don't think that either of them you could have gotten to that particular well at any point in time there in the teens. But I think that would have been the best thing for both. Misfit says, John needs to replace the scouting department, at least in part. Pro and college. I sense it's good old boys club. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. Accountability would be nice, like we had seen fall all on the shoulders of Carroll. And he's gone now. You know, the accountability's got to come to different places on this, and there's got to be some acceptance here, and not in the sense of looking for just heads, but because of the fact that we want to see the change in the ways. And you're not going to see that if nobody actually owns up to making any mistakes, you know, which is a little bit of a concern, I think, when you have an issue that has continued for so long. Ernest Jones Fro. Jamal was fun before he got injured. Hindsight's 2020. Yeah, the injuries are the hard part to predict with Jamal. You're right there, Ernest. I think 2 first-rounders and a third round on the surface of it does look, even in retrospect, like so very much, even if you were getting the player you kind of thought you were there with Jamal. I think the tough part, too, there with that trade, it's like the Jimmy Graham one, where you're making a trade for a guy that is so different in what he brings to the table from what you want to run defensively, for what you usually require from the position, that you go, okay, well, you're going to make that work, or you're going to set this guy loose and allow him to do what he does best, or you're going to try to force fit him into what you want done in your scheme. And it was unfortunately the latter rather than the former. And that's what, as much as anything, that makes it look like a bad trade, is that you didn't look like you had much of a plan in place. It just looked like a ready, fire, aim kind of move. Slowly one, it's weird all these defensive linemen are having breakout games against the Seattle Seahawks. What a coincidence, huh? What a coincidence. Jeffrey, if only someone had known trading 2 first-round picks for a safety was a bad idea. Oh, yeah, everyone did. That's true. Kieran, HawksNest, I'm saying Huff is the reason for a bad offensive line play for the last 10 years, laughing at it. No, I don't think you were saying that, Kieran. But I also think we can agree this is a different level of bad you could see coming. You couldn't see coming, I think is what you're saying, or you could see coming. Yeah, because he's a new guy. I mean, it's hard for me to differentiate, Kieran. It really is. I look at the line play over basically the past 3 years, with the exception of the first 10 games Geno started there in that first year, and I say it's pretty much been about the same shape to me. So I mean, it's been league worst crew. You know, I mean, we're kind of cutting between, well, is it the league worst and then an absolute atrocious beyond that, or is it just league worst, where it's like that? It's, you know, somewhere in the neighborhood of about the 27th, 28th best unit for about the past 3 or 4 years, in my opinion. So it's all kind of in the same kind of place a little bit to me. But it's also just with the question of play there, Kieran. I don't have any background with this guy. I don't know what he is or isn't doing in the past. You know, I can read out what I'm seeing on the team, but if it looks kind of the same as it looked always to me, it's harder to necessarily to point to him at the centerpiece of it. And he's definitely could be a part of it, though. I come back to, though, is there something at the core here? Is there a thing that we've got that could be part of the issue? This is part of the issue, but where's really till we get to the core of the issue if we can? Is there a core point of the issue? I tend to think there is myself, by my opinion, on this. And that would be just that comes down to we're not putting the proper amount of resources into it, so we're not getting the good performance with that. Certainly development's part of it. Certainly maybe having bad offensive line coaches for the past 10 years could be a big part of it too. But I can't lead with those being the main issues at the forefront. I go maybe apart. And I have no problem with them carrying one to make the change. They want to move off for Huff. It's hard for me to make that determination off a guy for 1 year when the performance level from my eyes is about the same as it's always been. He's not impressed, and I got no issue moving. But I think if we start to put more resources, we'll get better play too. Nick, every draft pick the Hawks take, they miss out on some awesome player. Rundaz, Adams was dominant with the Jets, for sure. For sure. Ricardo says, I seriously doubt the Rams have the magic power that the Hawks lack, especially when it was reported that McVay wanted Murphy. We should probably point to the coaching staff and player development. Yeah, probably. Tasha says if we played Murphy in the right position, he'd be a monster. He would, Tasha. Yeah, he's being depressed at the nose tackle position, that's for sure. It's a good point. You're right, Ricardo. That's Ricardo. Same thing he's kind of saying. Murphy would probably look better on the Rams with better coaching, and yeah, he'd be used like the Rams are kind of using Fisk a little bit too, which would have been you'd get a more productive Byron Murphy from it. Yeah, we're putting him in nose because we don't have any good nose tackles we can rely upon. Shoot, we just signed another one today. McDowell and Adams, 3 first-round picks completely wasted. Pretty much there, yeah. Kurt Bernard, how you doing, man? Christopher Corona says getting rid of Unger was a capital sin. Goes to show what John thinks of Pro Bowl centers. Haven't found a replacement since he left, Christopher, that's for sure. And John sure hasn't put a... You got the second round pick for Posick, and they couldn't get that guy into center for the first 2 years of his career. Took him to like his final year that they finally just slid him in and let him play his natural position. John says, Quinn Ewers being John's savior is scary to me. He seems like another Matt Corral to me. Limited arm strength and game depends on an awful lot of passes behind the line of scrimmage. Yeah, I definitely don't want to see Ewers, that's for sure. No, thank you. Please, no. Please, no. I thought Trey Lance was eventually going to be a good player. Why are the Cowboys not starting him? Being that he's had forever to learn the scheme as a mental, because I'd like to sign him. I think and I've liked him a lot too, John. So this is a miss on my part as well for him as a player. I just think that he's not developing as a player. And if you can't get out in the field in that kind of game where they had Cowboy quarterback had like 80 yards passing yesterday and you can't oversee that, then you're just not good enough. I'd say probably. Kieran says, yeah, my point is we can't play them when they're limited. No, we have to play them when they get their S together. Oh, you're talking to Jordan. Sorry. Haley, Hawksnest, I need it known. I predicted this record going into the bye, had a loss to the Dolphins, win versus the Giants, and then we take the Rams and Niners rematch games and split versus the Cards. Nostradamus? Haley Damas? Haley Damas. I like Haley Damas. Halo Damas. Well called, Haley. Right on the button. See, this is not that we've ever known how to use properly tight ends anyway. That's true. The Gospel says Jets drafted Garrett Wilson and Vera Tucker with our picks. One of the best wide receivers and one of the best guards. Yes, they did. Lance had the physical tools, John. He did. I liked him a lot. I would have loved his fit here, but I just don't think he's developed. And he was a risk, There was a bust factor to him, no doubt about that. He wasn't one of those like, oh, we got the high floor with this guy. You were going for definitely the ceiling. Jordan Davis is a dream pick, says Christopher. He's a pretty good player for the Eagles. Yeah, Femi, good to see Josh Jobe get an active roster spot. He certainly has earned it. Young Gun says W for Pumpkin. She's sleepy tonight. She's out. El Nino says, yeah, didn't Bam Howell lead the league? And I like Bam Howell. That's his new nickname is Bam Howell. He did lead the league in sacks last year, El Nino. 50. And that was with a league average pass protecting unit, by the way. 3 hours says, I don't disagree. I'm just saying our O-line can make backups look great. It's true. We give out career days like candy, baby. Who wants some Tootsie Rolls? Who wants some suckers? CJ says, Brandon, why is D still our kick returner? Team seems to be liking him more than we do as fans. Hard to say. I'm would be with you on that point of saying I don't see what it is the team saw in him to be riding with him up into this point, and that probably should have pivoted off him after week 1. Where like I said in week 1, but they don't. They like him. One of those ones is a head scratcher for me. Consumer says, did we just sign N'Keal Harry? Laughing out loud. What the F are we doing, dude? Is a bust a bus? That one's a little bit of an odd one for me. I think he's just to the practice squad, but guy that was a receiver coming out, had a hard time gaining much separation to the pro level. Not very quick off the line of scrimmage. So then he changed to tight end. I don't know. I guess it's a flyer guy. Maybe they think he can develop there. I don't know on that one, Consumer. I was kind of like, N'Keal Harry. Really? I mean, is there a problem at tight end right now? Maybe it's a long-term thing. Maybe they're thinking like a year from now, get him in the building, start developing or something. He was a great contested catcher in college. So he could bring that element to the tight end room, potentially, I guess. Tasha says, I thought N'Keal Harry couldn't run routes or hang onto the ball. It's kind of the going word on the street with him. Doesn't generate much separation. Not the greatest route runners, but he's moved to tight end now, Tasha. So I don't know, last year or so we've seen a few receivers try this, and it doesn't tend to go too well. I can't remember the last success story. We had a guy who's been the years for a couple years as a receiver, and then he's going to gain 10, 15 pounds and try to turn into a tight end. Probably not going to work. He's one of my misses too. And Keel, I liked coming out of the draft quite a bit. And a lesson learned moment. You do this drafting stuff, looking at these prospects and trying to figure out who's going to be who. And that was one that stood out to me in a learning moment of being very, very hesitant on guys that really are over-reliant in college on the contested catch. That they're not running routes, they're not getting open as much. The quarterback's just sort of saying, F it, throw it down to them, and they're just going to jump up and get it. If they're going to be that kind of player, they've got to be brilliant about it. So they have to be, or Roma Dunzier level of kind of efficiency of that. Now, Dunzier was also very, very good in his route running and ability to just create separation via that. So he was not just that kind of guy, but another guy like that, but Mike Evans, young Mike Evans. That's a guy that got Johnny Manziel basically drafted in the first round with Johnny just, run around a bunch and then throw it up to Mike down there at Texas A&M. And he'd just sky over the top of guys. And he was insane about it. So you got to have that next level to be able to do it that way. And Keel was not 6'2". He's not going to be that big a leaper, that big a jumper. He's just guys are too close in size at the pro level to rely on that one skill. Misfits is Harry's like Ayuk except horrible. And yeah, 3 hour, you're right. DK probably wouldn't have fallen to us if not for the neck injury. That was a big part of what allowed him to slip. Jack says, how's the injury looking? I haven't paid attention to the report yet. We should be in good shape. We're expecting DK, expecting back Lucas. I don't think we've got anybody really that's going to be out that wasn't already on the IR expected out. So, I mean, as good as you could ask at this time of the season, coming off a bye. Yeah, Mike Evans is the first ballot Hall of Famer, baller, no doubt. He's had a great career. Great career. Great career. All right, we'll get the last couple questions on here, folks, and we'll put a bit of a button wrap up on this one. Let me just thank the sponsor of the show today. That sponsor is going to be Underdog Fantasy. Underdog Fantasy going on right now. If you lost your fantasy league, you're already down the dumps about that. You want to retain a little bit of your pride. Well, get over there onto Underdog Fantasy today. They've got weekly fantasies you can get in, get a whole new roster put together, start getting, a new strategy down for next year now, so you're prepared for next year. You can go right now and get a 2-for-1 deal when you use my code NEST on their site, Nest, and that will match you 2-to-1. So $200, get $100 back. $100, get $50 back. All the way up to $2,000 with $1,000 back when you use my code or click the link at the top of the description section below, and that will automatically put you in route there for that code. You got basketball kicking off now. We still got the football season. You get in weekly fantasy. They've got pick'ems in there where you can get players over, under yardage, touchdowns, first half stats, second half stats. There's a lot to delve into there. You can build up your parlay, go win yourself some money, get some money from me to you through them, and you support the channel at the same time. Now, there are restrictions in the state of Washington, but if you use the app in a casino in the state of Washington on their network, you can use the app in full via that way. And I know we got a lot of casinos out there in Washington. So thank you, Underdog Fantasy, for sponsoring the show today. I appreciate them for doing that. Let's see where you guys are kind of at right now, and we'll just kind of put a button. Just want to do kind of a semi-quick in and out. We did 2.5 hours, so we didn't do too bad today. And Nagasa, that's something, I think, Nagasa, you bring up a good point on this. The Rams and the Niners, he says, are kings of the mid-round picks. The Niners and the Rams, and what's part of what's separating them and what they're doing versus what we're doing is they're doing a much better job of developing those back-end players. The Rams, for the past few years, have been without first-rounders across the board. They've got years they've been without second- and third-rounders. And yet, they're able to make sure that they're still doing really well on those picks in the back of the draft. And they're finding value there. Logan Bruss, starting center this year with some of the injuries in that offensive line. And he's holding up out there. We've got to get better value out of those later round picks. We got to, Kobe's doing pretty good now at safety. You got Tariq Woolen doing pretty good out there. But then you look across the board at the rest of this team right now, and you're not really getting much performance out of anything past that 4th round and onwards. And considering, especially in the early part of the draft, it still can be a little bit up and down at times there too, that we need to get a little bit better if we can there. And maybe some of that is someone else was saying above, was talking a little bit about the development. Some of that's probably got to go a little bit to the development side of it too. But it would be nice to get a little bit more out of it, especially as you look at the Niners this year. I mean, Ricardo Green, a little bit of a later pick for them to pick him up. Dominic Pooney, 4th round. Malik Mustafa, I think another 4th round pick. These guys are playing well for them. Isaac Arendo sliding right in there as a running back and providing them production and value there. So we've definitely could stand to get a little bit of an uptick there. 3 hours says, would you mind a quarterback in the third, like LSU's quarterback? Not even going to attempt to spell his name, Nussmeier. And yes, I am. I have also a heavy suspect. I'm a little bit like the detective on the case on this one, folks. I'm sniffing something, okay? I'm sniffing something. And I think John for years has been batting about the idea of drafting a quarterback almost on a yearly basis, or if there's a guy worthy of doing it in that section of the draft, he'd like to do that between the 2nd and 4th round, that he would pick a guy in that developmental way. And when we had Russell and you brought him in, you did go through that whole first year there with Russell with 3 quarterbacks on the active roster. I could see him taking another approach like that this year. And the main reason being is because of the fact that you have so many, there's a glut of quarterbacks in that 2nd and 4th round place of things. There may be a couple guys in the 1st round, but there should be a good number of guys eligible to be picked in that 2nd, 4th round. Some of those guys might fall the 5th and the 6th, but definitely you're in that range there to maybe pick one of these guys who've got some legit talent to them. They're not just overachievers or tryhards or maxed out prospects that don't have a lot of upside to them. There's some upside there. And there's some guys that have started a lot of football games too, if we're talking about replicating the Russell Wilson blueprint and looking for that kind of guy. And so I'd like to see it. I certainly would like to see it. TJ says, Brandon, is this a must-win game versus the Niners? It is if you're having a hope this year. Yeah. You've already given yourself a position here at this point, I think, where you can probably maybe lose like 1 or 2 more games to have any chance of winning this division, and that you're likely to have to win the division in order to get to the playoffs. So you lose this game, hard to see you just winning on out through at that point going forward through the rest of the year. And especially another loss within this division is you're going to start to need some of the tiebreakers within the division as well if you're thinking you have a chance to win it. So all of that adds up to me of this is really pretty much as close as you get to being a must-win game without really being a must-win game. SL says this was a boring weekend. I don't know where to aim my weekly Seahawks frustrations. Amen, SL. Amen. Fire Sloan, go Hawks, man. Duck fans are always welcome in here, man. Duck fans in. We're all Pacific Northwest Seahawks fans. That's how that works. Haley says, my ideal draft this year is guard, wide receiver, nose tackle, center, linebacker, cornerback in that order. Wide receiver with yak ability would be sick. I could go for that, Haley. I could go for that big time. Big time. And Misfit, we should be better with the mid rounds. You're not expecting to hit all those, but a few more success stories would be nice and would help out the development of this team by a big measure. SL says, I want Coach Mack to be comfortable enough to upgrade his coaching staff next year. I think he's got to come into this offseason and make the evaluation both at the roster level, SL, and at the coaching level. This is these head coaching jobs don't come along all the time. You're not guaranteed another one. You want to make sure this right. And if you're going to go down in flames with the guys that you know are teaching your system and executing your vision the way you want it executed. And you might have thought you had the right guys in last year in the staff you've assembled. You may be at the place now where you're thinking, there's a couple guys on here that aren't going to be that. And so both players and coaches on this have to be looked at through that evaluation point as you want to make sure you got all the right pieces in play, both roster and coaching wise. Have a good night, CJ. Appreciate you. Ernest says John Schneider was visibly upset when losing Jordan Brooks. I don't know. I mean, they had a chance to match a relatively easy offer there, and they just didn't match it. I think that they knew the deficiencies there in Brooks's game were not something that the new coaching staff was necessarily going to want to take on. Haley says, isn't the issue with drafting scheme fits that we've been cycling schemes the past 3 years? Like, I don't know, lots of cycling. You've definitely moved through a lot of schemes to a degree. As somebody else said below there, Waldron and Grubb's scheme are similar, Haley, in the respect of you are looking for mobile offensive linemen. And so that there's not, I think, a lot of tangible difference in that as a base point between the both of them. And that you haven't exactly, you did a good job with Cross and Lucas. They're good mobile guys. But, you dropped to those two guys, Haley, as guys that came out of college, out of spread systems, out of air raid systems. But making them both actually really good fits to this system, quite frankly, too, of course, because same system. Yeah, misfit. Mobile guards for zone, we have none. No, we don't. Our guys are not what you'd like ideally on that. 3 hour 8-9 is all things good record as of right now. I wouldn't be surprised if we go 6-11. I see it about the same way, 3 hour. Yeah, that's my outlook too. SL says, every time I turn on the Rams game, that's when they decide to do well, so I'll just ignore them now. See, you're causing it, SL. Stop looking. I know you want to watch football, but you've got to do what's good for your team right now. And that's force this Rams loss by not watching. The universe is telling you something. You can't ignore the universe, okay? You do so at your own peril. Jordan, Bradford definitely tested really well coming out. But do you really feel like, Jordan, watching the tape with Bradford, that you feel like he's athletic when you watch him move on the field? He's awful in pass protection with his lateral movement and his slide. And I can't think of one time I felt like he's gotten out in front and really waylaid somebody out in front on a second level block or pulling back in space. I know he was tested really well, but I mean, like, he's starting to feel a little bit to me like the type of guy, Jordan, that they have on the track running the 40 and he pumps out a 4.3 and you turn on the tape and he's like 4.55. I grant you that he was definitely athletic coming out, for sure, and how he was tested, but I mean, I just don't know if the tape is telling me that and what I'm seeing from him. El Nino says, KC is spending $60 million on an O-line, and Mahomes was sacked 4 times yesterday. Haley, Bradford's feet are not slow. His hands are bad from a technique standpoint. He just looks confused. He's not slow. There you go. So the one says I can make a 7-minute highlight of video of Bradford looking lost. He's inept. Jordan, he isn't a power run game guard either. He isn't showing power. No. Jordan says, I'm not saying he's good either. I'm just saying he's athletic. Definitely was testing the 98th percentile athlete, Jordan, to your point. And I thought that's where I had trouble comparing a little bit of that testing score to what we've seen on the tape from him, where I just don't always feel a guy that's a 98th percentile guard for the position. Jordan, Hawks says, no, I don't. That's why I said when a player's thinking too much, he's going to look slow. It's true. That is true. Very good point. He is bad, yes, but he is athletic. It's very reasonable. That maybe it's a bit of the overthinking. He's thinking about his hands, thinking about his the width of his base, thinking about his strike point, not just thinking about just moving and fast and free and letting it rip. And for again, not saying he was not athletic. Definitely test athletic. It was just on what I've seen from him on the field. I've yet to get any of the measure of that, the athleticism. And so let's say he is an athletic. I think the place that we come to as a common point is, is he not mentally all there in the respect of understanding the detail, or he's thinking too much? Well, okay, is he going to start to think less with time? Maybe that does develop with time. Hopefully that develops with time. You'd think that would develop with time, but it hasn't taken that step forward this year off year one. There is just as much a possibility there that he kind of remains as a player that ultimately is very physically gifted, but that is unable to tap into the refinement he needs to take advantage of those physical gifts. Ricardo says, I don't like that narrative of bad habits unless standing like a statue is a bad habit that can be learned. Dude has a slow processor, a 386. He hasn't upgraded since the 90s. Time to get an upgrade. Oh, jeez. Jordan says, perfect analogy is golf. If you are thinking you're not going to play well or have a good swing, everything will look off. It's valid. Emily says, if Bradford doesn't get better next season, we need to move off him. Yes, I'd agree with that, Emily. Definitely. I think if he doesn't come back at training camp with the game taking some big leaps forward, even by year 3, it's you're back up, and that's our plan. That's where you'll be, kind of. But I also am where you're at, Jordan, on this in the final point of this, and all be all, we probably going to have to get replacement in both guards. And I'm still very hopeful for Haynes. I'm not throwing him out, not baby with the bathwater. I'll keep the baby, toss out the bathwater, but let's throw out all the bathwater so we can refill it up with clean water. Yeah, can't assume they're going to be good. And that's been that point I've gone to, Jordan, on this is that they may still have upside. They may have refinement. I'm hopeful they get that refinement. I ain't bailing on them. But I want to see the team really go, okay, we're not counting on that, though. We're not going this offseason like, between the two of them, we'll have impact from that position next offseason if we just ride with them as a right guard. We got 2 options there, cream of the crop. Somebody's going to rise. One of them will rise up. Let's just count. You just can't afford that, I don't think. You got to go with a little bit more certainty there into this offseason if we're really hoping to move this unit up as a whole a little bit higher. Nick says, unless Lucas shows he can stay healthy the rest of the year, I think we need to address all offensive line positions but left tackle. Very well, I think, is the way you might have to go. Well, I don't think it's very well. You would have to go that if Lucas can't come back and play healthy this year, you're going to have to add tackle into the mix. Part of where we come about how close the team is versus how far away they are. If Lucas ain't coming back and you're maybe having to look at addressing 4/5 of an offensive line this offseason, in addition to maybe 2 inside linebacker positions, in addition to maybe one of your outside corner positions, in addition to maybe safety, in addition to tight end, in addition to maybe the number 2 wide receiver role, maybe we're a little bit further off. Maybe. But that's also something to be determined at the end of the year. Lou says, hopefully with healthy Abe back, Bradford will look better. He needs to lean on somebody. That'd be great. And as I said at the start of the year, Lou, when I predicted my 11-win record, I said, I'm going to predict 11 wins for the season here, but I'm predicting that with the thought process that Lucas is coming back sooner than later, and that he and the season success by a large measure sort of hinges on his return more than any other player, more than Uchenna Nwosu coming back or anybody else. So if he can come back and give you that kind of effect and that kind of impact, I think it would be really huge for the players. And as Haley was talking about earlier, it would be huge for the guys around him to help them out, theoretically, too. He says, draft a guard, sign a quality vet, draft a center, and count on Olu or Sundell or the rookie at OC. I'm comfortable with that. Right tackle could be a problem, too, but let's be optimistic. Let's have some optimism there, Haley. I like that. I like that. Gotta do something. That's where we come back to Kieran says you need to tackle to cover Abe Lucas. That's where if we can find that guy too that could be the potential tackle guard guy. You find a little bit of a fluidity there. There are those guys that do pop up in the draft, and maybe they're able to kind of locate on that kind of guy. Kelvin Banks out of Texas. Maybe not a tackle long term in the league. Maybe he can in a pinch roll with you at right tackle if you need him for a while. You can kick him into guard, though, by and large, when everything's all steady and that if Lucas is out there, he can go right into guard and be just perfectly fine in there. That's the bit of the way to get a 2-for-1 on that, if they can find that player. J.C. Latham being the kind of guy they were sort of targeting in that manner in this last draft. Rob says, Dodson makes sense to me. We don't have the cap to pay him, and we could start and develop the rookie instead. Yeah, I think it's a fair way of putting it, Robs. I think they weren't also necessarily getting the kind of play they thought they were going to get out of Dodson this year in a prove-it kind of contract. So, Obi-Wan, would you be down for some DJ Humphries if we get rid of Abe Lucas? Yeah, I'd probably be open to it. I don't think the Cardinals are going to let him go, though, Slopey-One. They got plenty of money to spend. They can even overpay to keep him on in there, and so I don't think that they let him get out the door. SL said we should temper our expectations with Abe. He probably is rusty since he hasn't played a game this year. Yeah. I think it's more just if he's back kind of finding his way, as long as he's healthy for me. I trust in Abe. If he's good and he busts off the rust and give him another year back, he'll be fine with that. It's more of if the knee's still bothering him, if he's not able to get his full push on it, that'd be the word where the worry would be. Rob says 11 wins is also possible. So possible. We just need a better in the trenches. That's where it starts and ends for me too, man. Not ends, but that's where it really does start. Get the trenches right. And this team will be so much risen up with it. So many other players that will see their game elevated with it. Misfit says we need Trey Smith, ascending player. Kansas City Chiefs guard, great player. Certainly he's going to be a free agent that I'd be comfortable with taking a look at. I was looking at Booker the other night, Misfit. Looks great. You want to go pick him? Go take him. He's awesome. Nick says, hey guys, remember that prospect Graham Barden who would play every position along the offensive line? Man, if only we could have picked a guy like that. Yeah. Graham was a good one. These guys come along, so it's just about target them. They're always there in a draft. There's maybe not a baker dozen of them, but a baker dozen of them, but they are there in the draft. They are available. It just takes the fortitude, will to go and actually grab them to make them that point of priority. But I'm with both those two guys. I like them. Haley says, Abe's going to pancake someone so hard this week, there'll be a Miss Butterworth commercial. Let's go. Let's go. So, would Wyatt Davis be someone you're interested in free agency? Haven't scouted him, so I'd have to take a look at Wyatt Davis. I'm vaguely aware of him, as a player in this league for the Browns guard. Browns have put together a pretty good offensive lineman, former 3rd-round pick. Hasn't played this year. So I don't know. He hasn't played since 2022. I think you're the Wyatt Teller guy is the guy I think you're meaning, which yeah, I'm completely with, I think the Wyatt Teller guy, Slobey one is the one I think you meant. Wyatt Davis hasn't played in a couple of years. But Teller, yeah, I'd be open to that. Misfit, thank you for joining back in the Hawks Nest as a Pro Bowl member. Appreciate you for doing that. Rob says I'd rather not tank, but I wouldn't mind kind of letting the season go and have a higher pick to trade down or pick up an offensive line or Malachi Starks. 6'3" with that speed is a must-have. Starks would be fun. He would allow you to push Devin Witherspoon back out to outside corner, and you could slide in and play that slot role and play really well. Maybe a guy that I could see certainly McDonald falling in love with and one target, and seeing in him a guy that's like Kyle Hamilton, sort of as a 2.0 kind of player. So definitely possible. You literally bring in linemen until you find the ones that fit your scheme, and you have to find a tone setter with the linemen. You do. Yeah. You got to hit it hard, El Nino. You got to hit hard. You got to bring in the linemen. You got to bring them in. You got to not just kind of go, we got one guy here, one guy here, one guy. We're set. But hammer the position. Hammer the position and understanding that it's not gotten the development in recent years from just going draft, that you haven't utilized all the methodologies you could to improve the unit. And then if you utilize all those methodologies and it's still weak, then that's something. Then you can look back and go, okay, well, something else was broken in this process. But once you can take care of it in that way, I think you're going to see the performance of the unit improve with that. I do. All right, we're going to wrap it up on that note, folks. I thank you guys for watching today. Rob's Misfit, thank you for becoming a member. Jeffrey Thistle, Washington Face Quest, Jordan, Seth, Promise. Thank you guys for all of your guys' support and donations to the channel today on the stream. I really do appreciate it. You guys are what allows me to do what I get to do here. If you guys could for me, please, on the way out the door, hit that like button, sub on up if you could. I've got a couple shows coming up this week. I'll be on the NFC West Roundtable show tomorrow. 6 o'clock, so we'll be over there. We've got Wednesday Behind Enemy Lines with Jesse Naylor of Last Second Sports. We got the B&B show on Thursday coming up there with Brendan as we're going to get back to cooking up on this. If you guys aren't also aware, I've been doing a good amount of clips and cut-ups from these live stream shows over onto my Hawks Nest Clips channel. So if you're not subbed up to the Hawks Nest Clips channel, and I get a lot of requests for kind of shorter content, I don't have 3 hours to listen to you yap, get to it, cut it up something. So I've been trying to cut that up for those folks that are wanting more of the smaller bite-sized kind of portions here from the show. So please do sub up over that channel as I will be continuing to feed, try to get about 4, 5, 6, 7 videos over there if I can about a week. And I'm going to keep pumping that up through this offseason, especially with the draft coverage. It's going to be heavily over there on the Clips channel where I'm going to be uploading quick player profiles and stuff like that over on that side of it. So do, if you can, get subbed up over that channel of it. I thank you guys for watching today. Appreciate all of the great discussion. And there's no nobody's got the only pathway to how this thing can get fixed or improved. And I will say throughout this offseason, I want all of the ideas in here. I want the discussion. And even if we do have places where we have differences of discussion, be it in the chat or between me and my chat, I think this is very much welcome. What we've got to do is, I think, probe this thing all the way around, look at it kind of from all sides and directions of it. And in order to kind of get our hands around, what is really the biggest problems at play here? What is it that are going to be the best moves this team can make to get us to being a contending team? Because there's a lot of moves you can make. What are going to be the actual ideal moves to make to get you to actual contending status? And I think that those are more specific and they're very pertinent. And we're just going to have to kind of talk it through, I think, to kind of figure it all out on that. I thank you guys today for watching the show today. Hawks making moves, moving to the future. Sometimes you got to go 1 step back to go 2 steps forward. And hopefully Tyrese Knight could be a 2-step forward kind of guy for us, the linebacker position in the long term. And who knows, maybe he even improves the position in the immediacy. You never know. I thank you for watching. Please hit that like button on the way out the door. But by all else, don't you ever forget. Don't you do it. Don't you do it. I'm telling you. Don't you ever forget. Go Hawks.